Guess it's kind of getting there, huh? So I guess we're
okay.
if you want us.
All right. Good morning. We'll go ahead. It's 8:30. We're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to the March 1st, 2024 California Board of Behavioral Science meeting. My name is Wendy Strack. I'm Vice Chair of the board. And before we convene, I'd like to remind everyone present that the board is a consumer protection agency charged with administering and enforcing the board's laws. Where the protection of the public is inconsistent with other interests sought to be promoted, the protection of the public shall be paramount. The Board of Behavioral Sciences will be holding this public meeting in person and via the WebEx platform. I will announce when we're accepting public comment on the various items. For each public comment period, we will first be accepting comments from participants present in the room. Then the moderator will open the lines as appropriate so that remote audience members can comment. Each commenter will have 2 minutes to comment. Moderator, would you please provide the audience instructions on how they may participate during the meeting at the appropriate time?
Absolutely. When public comment is called for, you will see a visual displayed on the screen. As stated, you will be given 2 minutes to speak with a 15-second warning before your time limit expires. For excuse me, the vast majority of people, you're going to hit that hand button at the bottom of your screen. Dial-in users will need to dial *3 to raise a hand. And for our mobile device users, you have 3 different screens and only one of them has a hand button. So please hit the ellipses button, it's the ... at the bottom, to find the appropriate screen with your hand. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, during the roll call, please introduce yourself and let the public know whether you're a public or a licensed member. Christina, will you please call the roll?
Nick Floyd.
Present. LPCC.
Susan Friedman.
Present. Public member.
Eleanor Uribe.
Present. LCSW.
Abigail Ortega.
Present. LCSW member.
Dr. Annette Walker.
Present. Public board member. Pronouns she, her, hers.
Justin Huff.
Present. LMFT, he, him.
John Sovet.
Present. LMFT. Pronouns he, him.
Wendy Strack.
Wendy Strack, public member.
Kelly Ramasinga.
Present. Public member. Pronouns he, him.
For the record, we have absences. Rich Jones, Yvette Ferris Willis, Amy Ames. We have a quorum.
Thank you. Before we begin, I want to remind all speakers to remain on topic when making comments on the agenda items. We have a full day and we want to make sure we get to every agenda item. We'll be looking to take a lunch break around 11:30, depending on where we are with our discussion. Board staff, will you introduce yourself?
Sure. Roseanne Helms, Legislative Manager for the board. Christy Berger, Regulatory Manager for the board.
And Steve Sodergren, Executive Officer for the board. Oh, you have to come up, huh? Sorry.
Marlon McManus, Assistant Executive Officer for the board.
Now is the time for the public to introduce themselves if they would like. This is voluntary, but is there anyone in the audience that would like to introduce themselves?
Do we need to come up or can we just talk loud?
I think you just talk loud.
Ben Caldwell, MFT. John Theodore, California Association of Marriage and Family.
Thank you. Is there anyone on WebEx that would like to introduce themselves? Moderator, will you open up the function?
Now is the time to raise those hands. Please tap that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand. And our mobile device users find that hand button by hitting the ... at the bottom of your screen. And it looks like I have a hand up. Hold on, Kathy Atkins. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Can't with CAFT. Thank you.
Thank you. And it looks like we've got another hand up. Bear with me just a second here. And Selena Lou Raphael, hold on just a moment. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Hi, this is Selena Lou Raphael from the California Alliance of Child and Family Services.
Thank you. And those are all of our requests. Do you wish to continue?
Great. We can close the comment. Thank you. Next on the agenda is the possible approval of the November 16th and 17th, 2023 board meeting minutes and the December 15th, 2023 telehealth committee meeting minutes. We are approving the telehealth committee meeting minutes today because the telehealth committee met for the last time on December 15th and won't be able to approve their minutes. So that'll be up to us today. Does any member wish to remove or correct any items? None. Do we have a motion to approve both sets of minutes?
I'll make the motion. I believe I had some assistance with this before, so jump in and help me if needed. So I'd like to make a motion to approve the board minutes for November 16th through 17th, 2023. And I also would like to make a motion to approve the December 15th, 2023 telehealth committee meeting minutes.
Do we have a second?
Second.
I saw Susan's first, sorry. Any comments from participants in the room? And moderator, do we have any comments from remote participants?
Now is the time to make a comment if you'd like to comment on the motion. The motion is for the meeting minutes. Please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial in users dial *3 to raise a hand. And mobile device users find your hand by tapping the ... at the bottom of the screen, the ellipses button. We're going to take just a quick moment to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the motion?
Yes, thank you. Are there any other board member comments? Okay, Christina, will you take the vote?
Dr. McBoyd,
Yes.
Susan Friedman,
Yes.
Eleanor Uribe,
Yes.
Abigail Ortega,
Yes.
Dr. Annette Walker,
Yes.
Justin Huff,
Yes.
John Silva,
Abstain.
Ricky Stratt,
Yes,
Kelly Ronacita,
Yes.
motion carries.
thank you. Now we're on to the item 13, the board chair report. First is board member attendance. The report shows attendance for board meetings and committee meetings during the last fiscal year. Please let staff know if you believe there are any errors. And as a reminder, as you all know, attendance at all these meetings is very important. The next is future board meetings. You'll see in the materials a list of the upcoming board and committee meetings. And then best part, we get to do some staff recognitions today. We have a couple of DBS staff members that we're recognizing for milestones in their state service careers. First is Martin Gamet, who's an LCSW evaluator and has worked for the state for 5 years. Sam Hall, the board's consumer complaint unit manager, has worked for the state for 10 years. Carl Peralta, the board's new registration unit manager, has worked for the state for 10 years. And Annie Hu, who's an AMFT evaluator, has worked for the state for 10 years. So congratulations for your project. Oh, and I forgot,
Yeah,
I'm
one
sorry,
more.
Gina Beaver, last but not least, board's discipline and probation unit manager, has worked for the state for 15 years. So we'll give her. And then Steve also has a special award for Sparkle Moss, who's joined us today. She'll be receiving a Superior Accomplishment Award Certificate of Recognition. Superior Accomplishment Awards are given to staff that make a significant contribution to the board or DCA that will assist in fulfilling their mandate. Staff are nominated by upper management and then confirmed by DCA. Sparkle is receiving this recognition for creating a tool that will allow the board's licensed evaluators to calculate and review supervised hours more efficiently. So thank you, Sparkle, and congratulations.
Just to explain a little bit more, as I think I've heard or I've talked about in past meetings about licensing evaluation, it takes a long time to evaluate the hours, the different supervision hours, because of all the forms that we get in. One person can have various supervision forms, and the hours have to be evaluated with minimum maximums, and there's a lot of calculations that go into effect. So Sparkle worked really hard and is continuing to work to really perfect these, but it's an Excel tool that the evaluators can just plug, I want to say plug and play to kind of do the calculations for them, so they're not having to actually, we're still getting out a calculator, writing down things on a sheet of paper. So it's really helping out. And then it actually is a good retention for us because although we keep the evaluation sheets, it also is it's a very more formalized evaluation sheet. So it's a step forward, and her manager recognized that, signed her up for that, and she got that.
Woohoo!
So
Where was the photo op?
Who's our?
Do we have a moment? Someone have a
Here, I got it here.
you should capture that.
So we want to take pictures.
This is newsworthy.
And add it to the
Right
newsletter.
away, right.
Put it on the newsletter. That's a great idea.
The newsletter item.
Yeah.
No, I meant like, you want to take a photo too?
Oh, perfect. Good.
Oh yeah, you can be in the photo too.
A ghost has decided to join our.
Whoa. Okay.
No one's there.
Okay, everybody ready? This direction. One,
Good idea.
2, 3.
Nice.
Once more. Uno, dos, tres.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And this is like weird.
Is Wendy out there? Open the door.
You're too practical.
There
Here's the ghost of
is no.
NFT.
Is that Max?
That's fun.
Max, are you there?
Okay, and we're moving on to item 14, which is the Department of Consumer Affairs update. Judy, is it Cucurelli? Sorry, sorry if I got the last name wrong, but
It's Cucurelli.
Oh,
Cucurelli, okay. ECA Legislative Affairs, thank you so much for being here.
Good morning, board members.
Morning.
Thank you for the opportunity to provide the DCA update today. And I'm actually work for the department's executive office of Board and Bureau Relations.
Sorry.
To begin today's report, I'll start with the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency update. The Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency welcomed a new secretary this month. Tamika Moss was appointed by Governor Newsom and will officially begin serving as secretary, or she did start serving, February 12, 2024. We extend a warm welcome to Secretary Moss and look forward to working under her leadership. Next, I'll provide a diversity, equity, and inclusion update, also referenced as DEI. The Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Steering Committee held its quarterly meeting on December 15, 2023. The committee reviewed a draft DEI intranet webpage for employees, re-elected its chairperson and vice chairperson for 2024, and discussed DEI trainings. After approval at the meeting, the committee announced the launch of a DEI intranet page to department staff. This page provides a centralized location with DEI-related tools and information and real-time updates on the department's DEI activities for all employees. Providing DEI training opportunities continues to be a priority for the department and the DEI steering committee. DCA is pleased to offer board members a DEI training on how leaders navigate DEI dialogue in the workplace. The training is recorded and can be taken online at your convenience via DCA's learning management system. The online training is provided by Christopher Beal, who has 25 years of corporate experience providing coaching, training, and leadership development. The training provides tools for effective conversations, psychological safety, and how it impacts these conversations, and includes discussion around challenges leaders are facing. If you have any questions about this training, please contact DCA Board and Bureau Relations. The DEI Steering Committee would like to continue to learn and showcase the DEI activities of DCA's boards and bureaus. If your board has DEI efforts and achievements to share, please send them to DCA Board and Bureau Relations. DCA continues to support DCA boards and bureaus in expanding culturally competent communications and promoting the importance of meeting the needs of all California consumers, licensees, and applicants. The latest issue of DCA's Consumer Connection magazine includes articles with information important to consumers, including a feature cover story translated into 3 languages to further reach of this information. The magazine is available on the DCA homepage. Printed copies of the magazine are also available. Please contact Board and Bureau Relations for more information. Next, I'll provide an update on the budget and the current year expenditure freeze. In December, the Department of Finance issued a budget letter that directs all agencies and departments under the governor to take immediate action to reduce current year expenditures. Given the fiscal outlook, the state of California anticipates a significant general fund budget deficit in fiscal years 23, 24, and 24, 25, which will require all state entities to take immediate measures to ensure more prudent spending. Except for time-sensitive, emergency-related, mission-critical, or information security, immediate actions include the cancellation of all non-essential travel, such as participation in seminars, conferences, and training, both in-state and out-of-state. Board should immediately review all spending and determine where savings can be realized. Specifically, when planning meetings, it is important boards conduct a cost analysis to determine the most economical option for the state. Please remember that when traveling, you need to consider all forms of transportation and hotel accommodations to determine the most economical option for the state. DCA has issued further guidance to leadership about exemption requests for purchases, contracts, and travel. DCA appreciates your partnership as we work together to reduce costs. If you have any questions, please contact Board and Bureau Relations. Next, I have some information about a threat assessment training that was conducted. DCA held an active threat assessment training for Board and Bureau leadership teams on February 2nd. California Highway Patrol Officer Byron Wong provided the training where participants learned about the steps that can be taken in the event of an active threat. DCA plans to explore providing this type of training to all board members and staff in the future. Next, I have a legislative implementation update. Federal professional license portability and state registration. The department successfully developed and launched a new process and portal in support of service members and their families following new federal and state laws passed in 2023. Known as the Federal Professional License Portability and State Registration Portal, this new DCA online portal allows boards and bureaus to accept online requests from military service members and their spouses who currently hold a valid license in good standing in another state, district, or territory to register their practice in California within the same profession or vocation if they relocate to California because of military orders. This online portal allows DCA boards and bureaus to receive, track, and review requests to ensure compliance with federal and state law. Registrations are required to be approved within 30 days of the Board and Bureau receiving all necessary documentation. In addition, DCA's military resources webpage and board and bureau licensing webpages were updated with federal professional license portability and state registration information. Currently, there are 21 individuals who have registered using the portal and are authorized to practice in California. DCA has shared the new portal with representatives from the U.S. Department of Defense, California Governor's Military Council, California Department of Veterans Affairs, and the California Military Department, as well as relevant legislative committee staff. DCA also provided an outreach toolkit to each board and bureau to share social media updates and listserv emails regarding the launch of the new portal with stakeholders. SB 372 was signed by Governor Newsom in September and became effective on January 1, 2024. This bill requires DCA boards and bureaus to update license records if they receive government-issued documentation demonstrating a legal change of name or gender for gender transition or domestic violence reasons. This bill allows licensees to request their prior name not be published online in connection with the license or the current name, and establishes a process for individuals to access a licensee's enforcement records under their prior name. This required DCA to ensure the previous name does not appear in connection to the new name on the DCA online license search, while also ensuring that any previous disciplinary records follow the individual so consumers can contact the board and bureau to obtain the previous discipline information without allowing the new name to be associated with the previous name online. DCA developed a new webpage and global form that licensees can use to request this new confidentiality. DCA also distributed an outreach toolkit with messaging for board staff to use when receiving questions from licensees and the public. Next, I have an update on the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act. On February 2nd, DCA provided guidance to its board and bureau leadership on the Bagley-Keene Open Meeting Act amendments to the teleconference meeting requirements, which took effect on January 1, 2024. The guidance included a general overview of the traditional in-person and teleconference meeting requirements and a detailed discussion of the legal requirements and best practices for conducting meetings using the two new teleconference meeting procedures. DCA is here to help boards and bureaus navigate through the new requirements. Please direct any questions you have about the requirements for teleconference meetings to your board's legal counsel. This concludes my report today, and I would like to thank each member for your dedicated service to protect the consumers of California. I appreciate your time today, and at this time, I will hand it back to Vice Chair Strack, and I welcome any questions from the board.
Thank you, Judy. Do we have any questions from board members? Dr. Boyd?
So one follow-up question. I'm curious for those that register for the federal professional license portability, if they're approved to be recognized in California to practice, are they eligible to supervise registered California associates as well for credible hours?
No, they would not be because they're not technically licensed.
Okay, so it's just granting them it's recognizing their license from another state to practice here, and that's where it's sort of, okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Do we have any questions from in-room participants? Moderator, do we have any questions from WebEx?
Now is the time to raise those hands on WebEx. If you'd like to make a comment, please tap that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to make a comment, or to raise a hand rather. And our mobile device users, hit the ellipses button, the ... if you're having trouble finding your hand button. We're going to take just a few seconds to see if we have a request for comment before moving forward. Seeing no request for comment, do you wish to continue?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Judy. Next item is number 15, the Executive Officer's Report. Steve, that's you.
That's my show. Thank you. Good morning. I'm just going to go down the line. If you noticed, I did have a little bit of different format to the Executive Officer's Report. I hope that it looks okay to you. I will definitely take suggestions and comments. You can do that on the side or maybe later during public comment. So starting with the board budget, we have been budgeted for $14.1 million for the year. Currently, we have spent about $6.5 million of those funds. And we are our current fund condition currently reflects 11.8 months of reserve. There's a little bit of change to that because there's $10 million that has been loaned out to the state. So because of the current budget shortage, the state has taken a $10 million loan from our from our reserves. And the Department of Finance has that ability to collect and transfer up to its $1.5 billion from various special funds to the general fund as a budgetary loan during these difficult situations and times. So the specifics of how this works is they borrow the 10 million, it comes out of our reserve. So you notice that will be reflective in our reserve funds as a reduction. They will pay that back once it is deemed that it's not necessary anymore to be used or they need it, or if for some reason the board hits a position where we actually have to use those funds, and then they will be returned to us. So we've gone through this process before. A couple of years ago, we did a $12 million loan that was finally paid back. So luckily our fund condition is really healthy. So I knew it was going to happen. Sitting out there, I think we had 21 months worth of reserves. So that's the $10 million that you'll see is not within our reserves right now. We've been very busy in personnel. Let me run through here. We do have a new regulatory manager. We promoted Christy Berger. Congratulations. It was long due. She does such a great job at regulations and everything else, newsletters and stuff too. So, and it's nice to have that position there. And then we have a staff service analyst, Paul Drabkin. He was a cashier who's been promoted to working in the enforcement unit. And we also have another staff service manager one, Carl Peralta, not here today. He got promoted. He was working in our licensing unit as an evaluator. And what we did, we'll talk a little bit more about this, but it's in with restructuring and looking at trying to really get that registration unit. It's a concern. We wanted to get the manager who was in the registration unit really had this big scope of responsibility. It was with cashiering, exams, and registration unit. So really what we've done is we created a manager position just for the registration unit. So Carl is going to be working with his team to concentrate on strictly associate registration applications and how to actually get those processing times down. So it helps out just to be able to focus on that one kind of topic. So that was nice. He got promoted. We have we hired on a managed service technician in the registration evaluator unit, and that's Vanessa Garay, and she's doing the ASW registration applications. We also hired another registration evaluator, and that's Zach Beauchamp. He was an OT in the actual cashiering. We promoted him up. We have an SSA licensing analyst. Haley Sutter had been working as a analyst already, but she promoted up to a more position where it's a lead position. Thank you for your help me on here. Lead position. And then we hired another SSA licensing analyst, Ashley Fryer, and she's going to be working in our LPCC unit. And a office technician, a cashiering, Pratiska Baral. She's trained and already doing a lot of work, so thank you. And then a associate government program analyst, Amanda Cottrell. I don't know if you saw her. She really wasn't. She was here yesterday in the meeting. She is a probation monitor, and she had left the board and decided to come back. So it was a short turnaround time. So we're happy to have her back, actually. So I wish she would have never left. Currently, right now, we have 4 vacancies. We have a vacancy as an enforcement technician, and that's an office technician. That's the position that will intake the complaint forms and assign them. We have a analyst, 2 SSA analysts in the registration unit that we are hiring. We've created 2 lead positions. So Carl will be the manager, and he'll be assisted by 3 lead positions, and then there will be staff that will work with the leads in looking at getting those applications processed. And then we are seeking for another cashier. So to note, we do have some personnel requests that we're doing. We are looking at right now for a limited term special projects person, and that's an analyst that will be brought on to work with when Roseanne has those questions when we're looking at, rate policy and stuff, is how many people do this, or what happens in this situation. We'll have somebody to actually concentrate it and run those reports for us, or do special looking at, going out and looking nationally on what's happening. So kind of get a support there. And then we also are looking to get a outreach person, analyst. Currently right now, outreach is kind of split up among staff members, but we really want to concentrate that. So we do have as we talked yesterday, more concentration on outreach. So that will help us to focus. So, and then the last thing we are looking at is looking at adding another manager to the licensing unit. Similar to the registration unit, the licensing unit, Lisa right now is in control of, or has 12 evaluators underneath her, and that's working with 4 scopes of practice. And so really, I think it benefits the board to really split that up. So you have a manager for each type of license, so they understand the policy, they can make policy recommendations, and they can work more efficiently. So that's what we're seeking there. And this is all in an effort for, I may have stole your win, but you can explain it better later on in organizational improvement. It'll be good to kind of go over that again, but it's all in an effort to try to look at our processing times, and not only just processing times, but what more we can do. I think if we're able to actually focus on these specific items. So population for the licensing update, we have 4,000. In the last quarter, we issued 4,566 new registrations and licenses combined. We currently have now a population of around 142,000, and it keeps growing. And that was a 2% gain from the last quarter. We had 39% less applications from the quarter before, and that just is the cyclical habit. It's nothing really newsworthy. And then we had 10% less applications. Those are the administrative applications like name changes and stuff, 10% from the quarter before. And there is processing times. I have to do a correction on that. I noted in the processing time figures, if you look at the math is not correct. So for the amount of days that have been increased or decreased. So the AMFT increased by 32 days, LMFT by 9 days, ASW applications by 33 days, LCSW had a reduction in 12 days, LEP had an increase in 3 days, APCC registration applications had an increase in 65 days, and LPCC had an increase in 25. And just to note, it is the busy season, and that second quarter is where we're going to see most of the increase in the processing times. And once again, this year, as I've kind of been explaining, and I think I explained before, we did have a resource issue in the registration unit that we are almost actually more than fully staffed now, because we are adding those staff service analyst positions in there. So we're gearing up for next year, or this next cycle, which will begin in April or May. It's going to start kicking in. And to note, to address those processing times, we are currently looking at putting the AMFT registration applications online. And we're hoping it will be on board, I'm thinking in April. We're doing the final testing and the final restructuring in Breeze. And the reason why we're doing just AMFT at this point is we want to kind of test it out to make sure it works. It's going to be a huge population as it is. I think people will take advantage of this. But if there are kinks in it, we don't want to be, sideswiped by that in a busy season. So that's why we're kind of proceeding with that. Yes.
Steve, if you look at the numbers though, it's almost split between what people did online and people did manually. So all those people who did it manually must have a reason. I mean, it's on the piece of paper that,
Yeah. So actually we don't have any of our registration applications online or any of our licensing applications online. And those are the ones that were, when we talk about processing times, are really concerning to us. When you look at that, I think you're looking at the administrative applications and stuff, where we did put, recently we put the name change online. And that's
renewal.
That's renewal too, yeah. And renewal, you can see, what I noticed is, I was gonna make note of that, but I'm glad you brought that up, because you can see from those numbers, as we enter into putting things online, I think with renewals, we have about a 90%, or even more than that, 90% of the people actually renew online. And if you look at the name change figures on there, you'll see how quickly people are transitioning over to doing the online form instead of the manual form. One of the things we are, because it does help out with resources and stuff to go online. One thing that I have, we are considering, going to a form where other boards have done this too, where they're actually just pulling off the manual forms themselves and just offering, you have to go online to do your work. That's something we're considering. As you can see, for the renewals themselves, I think that'll, for the quarter, I'm not looking, but I think we usually get about 300 and 400 a quarter. I'm not sure what I could look up the numbers, but you can imagine that would save quite a few hours on cashiering for processing that.
According to this piece, to the computer, it's a lot more than that. So we're manual, but
yeah. So.
Do you anticipate when the pilot for the AMFT registration on Breezy is going to sort of, do you have a timeline on when you expect it to be concluded and consideration for opening up to other?
Well, so that hopefully, I'm thinking for AMFT in May. We're working on the design and the configuration for the other two at the same time. So it should, I want to say this year if it goes well. I don't know when really necessarily, because we have to work with what the Breeze team, what capacity they have to fit into a actual a release date. But they have been, actually, I have to give them kudos because they have been working with us very diligently. So for the past few months.
And so just to clarify, so let's just say this next cycle period, April, May, AMFT registration can anticipate to be done through Breezy versus paper. It'll be an option for
It'll
them?
be an option. Okay. An option, yeah.
Kelly has a question too. Kelly and then Abigail.
Steve, what's the benefits of keeping manual forms? Just switch over to online.
So I think, I mean, honestly speaking for myself, it's always been I've always been hesitant to pull them offline because of accessibility. But we still could have those available for people that need to, if they can't do anything online, we would have those forms to actually have them, they can request them. We can actually get them one. Yeah. So I think that's only been the hesitancy, but I noticed that's what most boards are doing, or the boards that are really pursuing the kind of the electronic green, go green type of concept is they're just pulling them offline. So.
Okay. And then Abigail, and then Justin, but before you start, since we've had a request since the camera isn't panning in on members, so when you start speaking, if you could give your name, that way members of the public know who's speaking. So.
Sure. Yeah, Abigail. What's the goal for the application processing time now that you're fully staffed?
Well, we are, the dates that we are mandated, or not mandated, but within our actual statutes and regulation, it's 30 days for the registration application and 60 days for the licensure applications. So, I mean, honestly, 30 days, 30 and 60 are the goals for that. And like I said, with the restructuring of the registration unit, I can see I'm not making any promises, but definitely I think we can see a reduction into that. And then when we're working with licensing now, I think eventually we'll get to a good point there. So, yeah.
Justin, Thank you. 3 quick points. I am confused why you are saying that we have longer processing times because of this surge of applications, but you are also saying we have a decrease in application volume.
Because, so the application processing times, those reflect where we've got the processing times, we get most of our, for the registration unit, the bulk in May. And that's the first, so May, June, in July, you'll see definitely an increase in applications. Processing times, if you look back on those processing times, they'll be better because we're not starting to get into all the volume. Okay, and then, so then the processing times for the second quarter for us is we had, for the registration unit, particularly where we had staff vacancies and such. Okay. We start hitting those cyclical. Does that, I mean,
that does help. I did go back and look at the different quarters where we're up this quarter. We were up last November. We were up in February last year. We were up November before that. And unless I'm missing something, it feels like almost every time they're up, the response, which is almost every quarter, the response is, well, there's something strange about this quarter that's happening. Is there a way that next meeting, instead of giving us a 2-quarter history, you can give us like a 2-year history so we can see a better trajectory?
Yeah, I can. Yeah. Thank you. And that's actually one of the things with the reorganization of the things here, there's one graph I put in there, but I want to start getting actually an year over year or kind of comparison so that you can actually have a better idea of what that looks like. So great, thank you. I can't guarantee it's going to look too pretty maybe at the next time I may, but eventually we'll get to a point where it looks great. I mean, the graphs, not that. So, and this actually right now, we're currently working, I think for the registration applications there, we're currently working on mid-January, ones that are received in mid-January. And then the license applications, we're currently working on the first or second week of November. So.
Steve, can I go back? I'm sorry. I just want to make sure. Is there any way we can get like a firm date in which you're going to roll out the option for AMFT to register on Breezy and a firm date on when the pilot's anticipated to end? I mean, this is a barrier for a lot of folks to register by paper, and it's a burden for many folks. And I think it's important that the board have very firm dates on when we expect information to be shared with individuals. I think that would be important.
Okay.
And this is Nick, by the way. Sorry.
Yeah, no, we can get that.
And then just a reminder, when you start speaking, say your name so that folks online know. Susan
Friedman, public number. The 142,000 actually shows a big increase. I mean, I kind of remember when I first started here, it was like sort of around 110,000 or 115,000 or something like that. So, I mean, it looks like something is happening out there to fill, which is a great need in this state. I mean, do we have any idea what's happening out there, or is there more money available for people to go to school and study?
I don't know. That's something we should learn. But I just anecdotally, I know that the schools are seeing, some schools are seeing greater increase in, in enrollment for the social work or therapist positions. I mean, for graduate programs and stuff.
I wonder if the governor's office has paid attention, because I know he's really, really interested in this.
Well, and then, I mean, with the notice, I mean, with the importance of mental health being, really broadcasted out there, I mean, you're going to probably get more people looking at, oh, that could be an option for employment. And additionally, we do have a greater, it's within the numbers of thousands, but the out-of-state applications, those are picking up for social work and LPCCs. So we're getting quite a few of those, and that keeps to increase.
I add to that, I think that our license portability bill that became effective in 2020 really reduced a lot of barriers for out-of-state licensees to be able to seek a license here. So that's probably was a big help.
And you can see that in the numbers if you look at the LCSW and even like marriage and family therapy. Actually, we're still considering the amount of actual LMFTs outside of California, I think it's a significant number.
A lot of people have utilized that pathway.
So.
John Sovak, LMFT. What are you doing to anticipate for like a plan for staffing with the rollout of the Breeze online application, knowing that with any new application, there's going to be a lot of applicant error and a lot of processing error? Like, do you have a plan in place to try and create extra support when that rollout is happening?
So the application process itself is not necessarily going to change too much. What this will do is the applicant can actually submit the application, which really is it's not too much. It's pretty generic information that they have to fill out on that application process. Where really our evaluation comes in is looking at the transcripts and looking at the Education Institute certification, where they certify that this person has actually, done all the coursework that's necessary. And so that will still be, which we have right now, we have that electronically, where they can submit that electronically. So the only part of that which we have to look at for any sort of weird things happening is really going to be in the cashiering thing. I think what we're going to experience, and I think what other boards have experienced, is people, applying for the wrong thing, not submitting a fee. And so what we have to, it's making new procedures for, instead of using the time to process the fees when they come in with the paper application, we're going to have to do an audit on a daily or weekly basis to look at the transit applications that have been submitted to make sure that, either the fees are there or if that was a correct application. So that's where we're really gonna, what this does is it currently right now, it takes about, because of the deposit stuff, it's a 7-day processing. If we receive an application till it gets to an evaluator, that's almost 7 days right there. So it could shave off 7 days. And then if we could get down to processing applications on a daily basis, that'd be a dream. But yeah, so.
Okay, I would just encourage anytime you're rolling out a big change like this, that there should be a plan in place.
Oh, yeah.
Because you're going to have it both from the people who are applying to a way that is different for them, that they may be comfortable, so there's lots of potential for error there. And then on the receiving end, there's also people now looking at it in a new way, working with information differently because it is an electronic format. And I would just encourage you to maybe look at what can we plan to anticipate to support staff and the applicants when these potential things show up.
Well, the applicant thing is a really big thing for us, is making sure is having that instructions on how to actually utilize the Breeze form itself and stuff. So, getting that out there and having those instructions for the applicant is going to be critical. So.
I love this conversations, but I just add that FAQs, something that you can get out there fairly quickly for all parties, stakeholders. Yeah. The anticipation.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I will get firmer dates. I know Andrea is working on, we don't have firmer dates yet because it has to deal with when they're going to do releases and stuff. So we can get firmer dates. Where were we at? Examination update. We administered 5,634 exams this last quarter. That was a 1.5% decrease from the first quarter. We had 4 examination development workshops, and there was an occupational analysis. Occupational analysis are conducted every 5 years, and I know we've talked about those various times. And there was one done for the LCSW, LMFT, and LPCC law and ethics exams. And those came out, I believe it was last year. And those were used to develop the new questions and content for the law and ethics exams. And those law and ethics exams with the new content went into effect for the LCSWs and LMFTs. Those went into effect on January 1st, 2024. And the LPCC new exam content went into effect on February 1st, 2024. We have also included new sample questions in the Pearson VUE Candidate Handbook. That was a concern. We did have some old questions in there that may have not been legitimate. So we changed that. So that's corrected. On the ASWB front, ASWB has transitioned to their new vendor, PSI, and that was effective January 1st, 2024. At least for our board, I don't think there has been any really issues that have come up. And I wanted to note that the ASWB partnered with the Department of Social Work of Western Kentucky University to examine the disparities of social work license pass rates among people of color and those aged 40 and over. I thought it was important that we actually get that out there to our licensees, to hopefully they would take the survey that they were doing. So we put that out there on social media. Hopefully they participated so that we can get that data will be shared with us later on, and I think it'll be very valuable. Also, ASWB has finished their community conversation, and they had partnered with the Human Resource Research Organization, and this group facilitated qualitative research earlier last year to gain insight from social workers around the United States and Canada about their experience in the licensure process. They came out with a report, and I have the link in the actual report, my report. There's a link to the actual information that will kind of show you what they came up with. I would highly recommend go check it out, especially if you're on the workforce committee. Please check it out. So, really big item for them. ASWB is doing a social work census. And the social work census is a large-scale survey of the social work profession in the United States and Canada. And the data from the survey will be aggregated and used to develop a comprehensive and up-to-date picture of who social workers are and what they do. The census has two sections, and the data from each will serve the different purposes. There's one section that will ask questions about workforce study, and it will look at a social worker's education, employment, licensure, and demographics intersectionality. And the other one will be looking at the practice analysis to ask about the knowledge that's needed to practice social work safely and ethically at the entry level. So it's doing some of the it's basically a effort to do a huge occupational analysis. And I believe their intent is to include licensed LCSWs and other social workers that may not have to have license and are currently practicing. So we are going to be using our social media platform to put that out there, put the word out. I would highly recommend you pass the word along that this is coming out. Try to get people to participate, and it's in, I think next week it's going to be pushed out. So hopefully everybody participates in that, because that will help us. That data will. The National Board of Clinical Counselors, they have instituted a new retake policy effective January 1st, 2024. The waiting period between a failed exam attempt decreased from 90 days to 30 days. So that was nice. I think many people are going to like that. And we posted that, made sure that it was posted out there so everyone knew. We used our social media platform for that. And we have updated the Pearson VUE candidate handbooks with new information, and so those have been updated. Is there any questions about exams?
The only question I have, Steve, is when you look at the list that was included, and when we talked whenever it was, about the disparities with the social work exam, if you look at the list, you can sort of pick out, not really, but it will help you pick out this. Remember, we talked about the fact that somehow or other schools that have a very low pass rate, somebody should be working with them to find out what they're teaching and why they have such a low pass rate. And if you look at the list, I mean, like the very first school on there, which I don't want to say their name, but I mean, they had a fail percentage of like 84%. I mean, that's significant. I mean, that seems to me that, for example, that's a place where somebody should be focusing their attention. I don't know who the somebody is, but do we have any idea?
Well, I have ideas. I mean, and it's definitely, I think we've talked about this. I don't know if it's, I've spouted my, well, I don't know if you want to call it wisdom or thoughts or ideas on that. But yeah, I mean, there's similar to what ASWB is doing with schools that they're looking at. They put out like a packet for schools to use, for educators to use, that might help them with, you know, I think it's looking at the content or what students should know, you know, to move forward in their profession. Similarly, I mean, the board could somehow partner with schools, or by just posting that's the first start, is posting the actual scores online and having them visible. I mean, that's the first thing we could do. But I mean, there could be ways we could partner with education institutions, but it's a lot of work to do that. And I'm not sure, I think it's something that I would like to talk about in the Workforce Development Committee to get more ideas. But I think trying to look for ways to partner with schools might be a starting point. So.
Any other?
Yes.
Do we want to take a brief, I'm sorry.
I did have a quick question.
Okay.
Especially with the social work census, it is coming up in the next month.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to take the master list of communication to registrants and licensees and parse out social work and associate social workers and actually create an email invitation as well, not just social media? Because the percentage of people on social media versus our total registrants is still relatively low. And I think that could be a really valuable thing to add California Voice to this census.
Yeah.
And include in the newsletter.
And the newsletter, and hopefully, well, the newsletter might be too late. But,
okay.
But yeah,
that might even be a reason to try and do a parsed out email list and send it to that group.
Okay.
And do we want to take a brief out for public comments, and then we can finish your report, since it appears we have somebody who would like to comment? As the board vice chair, are there any members of the public who wish to comment at this time?
Thank you. Yes, Ben Caldwell, MFC. Steve, I've got a handful of questions. Do you want them all at once, or you want me to go one at a time? They're not awful.
Go one at a time.
What's happening with the BBS request to OPES to begin checking exams for differential item functioning to determine whether our own state exams have demographic disparities in outcomes?
We'll talk about it a little bit later, but in the Workforce Development Group, we talked about that. We are currently in the process of trying to figure out how to implement that in an electronic format. It's figuring out ways how to collect that data without us really having access to that data. So we are working with the OIS, the information technology people upstairs, and figuring out a way to do that. And we are looking at, it's probably going to be similar to, or what we want to design is something similar to the renewal survey, that's the HCI renewal survey. So if somebody is applying for their exam, they will be redirected to a survey to go take the survey, and then once they've completed the survey, they can go back and finish the process. But it will still, as always, it will be voluntary. So, yeah.
Any timeline on implementation?
No, not at this time.
Thank you. When will the publicly available information on the LMFT line ethics exam indicate which code of ethics AMFT or campus is considered correct?
That's, I knew. I don't know if I should have been planning. I should have known you were going to ask about it again. We had discussions after the last meeting. I don't have a specific date, but we are looking at, we are working with OPS after the last, was it committee meeting? I think we were talking about that. Maybe the Workforce Development Committee. We are working with that to put that out there. They have given us language. We just have to look to see where to put that. So.
Okay, thank you. The new sample questions that are posted online, nowhere does it appear to be indicated what the correct answers are to those sample questions, which limits their usefulness a little bit. Was that intentional, or can that be adjusted?
That, let me look. I mean, offhand, I would hope that would be adjusted because it doesn't really help. Okay.
And then I've got some other questions that I know are best addressed with OPEZ. I wonder whether it's possible to have an OPEZ representative, maybe at a future meeting, for other questions like this, so that they can be addressed in a public forum instead of having to go like through you to communicate. Take the time to get answers that way.
We'd have to put a specific agenda item on. So I mean, definitely, I mean, OPEZ will be back eventually to talk more about other exam issues. So I mean.
Okay. And then last thing. The ASWB clinical exam data that's in your report here shows that in the prior 2 quarters, overall, there were more than 2,000 attempts at the ASWB clinical exams. More than half of those attempts were failures. If the exam is meant to assess who is safe for independent practice, that suggests either that there is an egregious failure of the education and training process, or that there is an egregious failure of the exam in determining who is actually ready for independent practice. In a time when we have such a critical shortage of mental health providers, to have that many people who have completed all of their other requirements fail the test at the end is greatly concerning. And I bring that up, I'm not a social worker, but I bring that up just to see whether you or board members had thoughts on that.
I mean, I share your sentiments. Thoughts particularly to the actual data and the percentage pass rate. I really haven't had a chance to delve into that right now, but yeah. But no, but thanks.
That's all I have.
I appreciate that for bringing that up.
Okay, moderator, are there any commenters online at this point in the partway through item 15?
As just mentioned, we are partway through 15, and now is the time to raise your hand. If you'd like to make a comment, please tap that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial in users, dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. As a reminder for our mobile device users, you may need to hit the ... the ellipses button at the bottom in order to find your hand button. We're going to give everyone just a few seconds before we continue. And we have a hand raised. Kathy Atkins, hold on just a moment. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Hi, this is Kathy Atkins from CAMFT. I don't know if this is actually the appropriate time, so I'm going to look to Steve to maybe hold my comments till later. CAMFT submitted a letter to the Board of Behavioral Sciences regarding the state exam versus the national exam. And I didn't see any obvious area to discuss it later, but this doesn't seem actually as a appropriate time either. So if I could just get direction, and then I'll put my hand down for later.
I believe it is actually. I was going to mention that we did have a discussion yesterday in a closed session, and that was going to be part of my report. So I think it's pertinent.
Okay, thank you. So Kathy Atkins with CAMFT. The California Association submitted a letter to the Board of Directors again this week. In August 2023, we requested that the board begin consideration of switching to the national exam from the California exam. Our letter yesterday reviewed, I don't want to re-review it, you have it in front of you, but it reviewed the desire and advocacy efforts CAMFT has to move to the national exam. One, as we see telehealth and license portability, California is the only state with its own exam, which really leaves the California MFTs behind for compared to the 49 other states worth of MFTs. We want to advocate for not just our providers to have more job opportunities, but also to help with the consumer protection side. The more California is in line with the other states, it's going to be better for both provider and consumer. Second, on the federal level, they have positions that specifically talk about exams, and so we routinely have to advocate. should I finish this later or?
You have 15 seconds.
You
Okay.
can come back.
Okay, so if you could just take a look at the letter, and we appreciate your assessment and review. Thank you.
Oh, Kathy, I don't, if we,
We'll
David,
take comments again at the end
Yes.
of this item, if she'd like to.
you can actually, she can have a little bit more time here. If Kathy, if you want to continue. Or is that-
Okay,
Sorry.
thank you. Just on the federal level, that when we're advocating for positions like in the VA or other federal entities, we do run into the dilemma of having to advocate alongside the National Association. There's always a please hire, MFTs, OPS, and California need to remember there's a California exam. So it actually makes advocacy for MFTs on the federal level quite harder. This would level the playing field, so California MFTs were similar situated to the rest of the nation. As AMFT, the national organization, is advocating for the model licensure law, they are running into issues in other states who don't necessarily feel comfortable having California have its own exam. And so that has been a barrier that we're having to fight. AMFT is doing a great job to try to make a workaround for the California exam, but it is making license portability for our California MFTs more challenging. We recognize that there are concerns about racial bias, and frankly, not just in the ASW or MFT or any, it's just any standardized exam. So we do recognize it's there. And we also feel that while there are nationally exam requirements, that it is better for the California MFT and the California consumer that MFTs are on the same page as California MFTs are on the same page as the rest of the nation. And so while this conversation is absolutely germane and we advocate that the investigation into this continues, we also want to make sure our California MFTs are not left behind, which currently they are being. And we believe moving to the national exam, which already is trying to do, I believe Ben Caldwell talked about this earlier, the differential testing and things of that nature, they're already moving forward with that. So again, you have my letter in front of you, and we just request that the board begin discussions and assessment and analysis of whether this would be a good move for the California MFT. Thank you.
Moderator, are there any other remote participants wishing to comment?
Looking around, I would say that is our only request for comment.
Okay, great, thank you.
Did you want to take a break? Or I can go for it.
You want to finish the report, or you want to take a break?
Is everyone okay?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay.
It's only 9.
Okay,
have a
cool. Let's
question?
go for it. Oh, yes.
To what extent are we able to talk about closed session conversations that are pertinent to some of the public comments?
You really shouldn't discussion. We will have a forum to bring that up again. So, because it will be something that's on our agenda. So I think. Enforcement update. We had 505 consumer complaints, 240 criminal convictions in the last quarter. 532 cases were closed last quarter. 27 were referred to the Office of Attorney General. We completed the time frame for us to complete a formal discipline was 374 days. And the case is how long a case is at the Attorney General's office is currently at an average of 233 days. And our board investigation is at 71 days. All those are within the performance guidelines that have been set. So that's good. And we received 6 petitions for modification or termination. Moving on to the outreach and education, social media, there was a slight decrease in Facebook and Instagram visits this last quarter. And the visits were down by 15% and 19%, Facebook 15, Instagram 19. Even so, our Facebook and Instagram accounts still have a reach, a pretty good reach. Oh, I'm sorry, followers have increased by 947 for Facebook and 694 for Instagram. And that brings our totals. I know for Facebook, it's around 30,000 and it keeps growing. I feel like a teen or something. I'm like, oh, our followers. I'm sorry. So
We
it's,
got likes.
so it's still good. And yeah, we got likes. Well, that's the problem. We get a lot of likes, but then at the same time, we get some good comments and feedback. And like I said, it has been a kind of a good platform. Andrew's done a good job of keeping up with actually responding to people that leave comments or have questions. So that's been good. We are looking at, bolstering that effort as we move forward. We had 4 outreach events that we attended the last quarter, and the current newsletter is out. This issue includes information about law changes in 2024 and continuing education requirements for new licensees. And it also has an article concerning licensure examination. And thank you, Christy, for putting that out. Organizational effectiveness. We made changes to the BREEZE system to correspond to the AB 232 legislation that created a new temporary 30-day practice allowance for out-of-state licensees. This created an online platform where they can go in and actually submit the information that is required for them to be able to take advantage of that 30-day temporary allowance. So that was a big effort to get that through. And currently we are working on we have 42 what we call BREEZE changes that we're working on, or updates in BREEZE that we are working on or are in the hopper waiting to be worked on. And a lot of those include with the registration applications going online, and then we're also restructuring the whole way that BREEZE looks at our licenses to make it more functional internally. Communication report. The Consumer Information Center handled 3,800 calls for us last quarter. And last quarter, the board staff received and responded to 26,000 emails. And I'm going to pass this next organizational development. Or do you want to?
Well, I think you kind of touched on a lot of the points. I think you touched on a lot of the points as far as our organizational development with your personnel report.
Yeah, actually, who's speaking? Actually, sorry.
No problem. Marlon McMahon is assistant executive officer. Yeah, no worries. No, I was just going to touch on that. We kind of already gone over some of the things as far as like the changes we made to our rec unit. We did include a new manager over registration. So there's not really much to add. The only thing that I can add to the conversation that hasn't already gone over. Yesterday, we kind of touched bases on our strategic plan, which was our goal 5.1, which was to review our organizational structure to ensure efficient operations and to foster upward career mobility among staff. One of the things that we did do, which Steve has kind of already mentioned, is we did add the 2 lead evaluator positions in the registration unit. What this does, these are analyst positions. So what it allows is for promotional opportunities for our staff. Our hope is that with having these analyst positions, that we will be able to retain our staff longer. But if we are to lose staff, there is a career path for some of the other evaluators to seek promotions and stay within the registration unit.
And I'm having Marlon do the organizational report because he's doing all the work. He's been working. It's a lot of process to go through for when you're working with staffing and looking at hiring staffing and changing around our organization. You do have to do a lot of paperwork, a lot of justifications, looking at explaining why we need the positions, what the positions will include. And part of this, the organizational development, we're doing this, we are relying on some of these are called limited term positions. And these are positions that we have the ability to actually create, because we do have resources when we look at our budget. We do have the resources available, and we're estimating that we will have the resources available in the coming future. And so we can hire what's called limited term. So if anything happens though, eventually with our budget, or if it looks like we can't actually handle that anymore to be able to pay for those positions, we might have to do something. And what that does is, what we look at, it helps us to justify getting people in limited term positions, help justify that if we can show that they've helped out our processing times or our organizational structure, we can use that data to ask for a budget change proposal, which then will hopefully we can get those positions as a permanent position eventually. So we're hoping that we'll show progress with these and use that information for later on to justify, to make those permanent. So that's kind of the thing we're doing here.
So Marlon, I have what I think are two questions.
Okay.
We'll see how they play out. If you look at any of the surveys that we've done at the time I've been on the board, if you look at any of the online social media responses, the two biggest places that people have challenges are saying they don't answer my phone calls, or I email, I don't hear from everybody. So on the report here, it has the BBS calls received handle piece. And for December, it says that the call average wait time was 2 minutes and 24 seconds. Do we have understanding, is that a connection to an actual person, or is that connection to a person or potentially a voicemail or stuff like that? So in that response time, are people actually talking to a real person or being diverted into leaving messages? Do we know that?
So I was like saying, yeah, it's back at me. You don't have to worry about that one. So what number were you looking at in the? It's the.
This is the calls received handled by.
So the way it works actually is CIC. People will go through our phone tree, and then they will go through the phone tree, and it's really leaving a message for the board. If they decide that they don't want to leave a message for the board, they can then go to, then it will transfer them to CIC, and CIC then will work with them to get an answer to their question. They will consider the person, what they're looking for, and we have a way, if for some reason there's a way that they escalate calls, like if people really need something, they escalate calls to us. So really it is kind of diverting to, it ends up mostly into an actual voicemail, which translates into Teams. What I'm considering, and I think I might have talked about this before, and I think it's something that I want to work on this year, is with the advent of using Teams, it's a little bit easier to maneuver around instead of having the phone on your desk, which was complicated. Now Teams has a structure where you can do almost like a call center stuff. So looking at maybe implementing where we have a live person available for each unit to capture those calls, that people who really want to talk to somebody, they can actually have easier access to that. So that's because that is one of the things that we're looking at.
So I guess that just concerns me a little bit when we say response time or average waits. We're not actually talking about, I have a question, it's now being answered after a certain amount of time. We're saying you were able to be decision treed into a place where you could leave a message in 2 minutes and 24 seconds. But your actual, like, when was my question answered? We're not actually capturing that, are we?
Not necessarily. I don't know how many of those actually, a lot of those, the calls that they get may have been addressed and, taken care of, but truly, we don't know the actual data on that.
Right. So understanding that that's constant feedback we're getting in almost every survey that goes out on social media, it might be something to explore and address. Same question then we have the volume of emails received, but do we have any way of gathering information of how those are being responded to? What are the time frames there? You know, is
Yeah.
it like, oh, I am able to do same day, or it's 3 weeks,
No,
or
it's 3 days.
information like that? So I think that would
Yeah.
be something to capture as well too, because once again, we keep getting this feedback. And I think these are holes in the information we're receiving that would maybe help us learn how to respond more effectively.
And we do have a three-day max on everyone of returning emails. And I know most of the licensing unit does it on a daily basis, or mostly on a daily basis for most units. So.
Yeah, and I think we've like, included like different emails. Like if you have a question pertaining to continuing education or to registration or to licensing, we have specific email boxes where this information can go. So we're trying to work on getting the information out to people who can actually like select instead of going to like a general like email box and it has to kind of be divvied out to each unit. So as we get that information out, and we've tried working with DCA to honestly try to eliminate like the general box and specifically kind of guide people to our website so they can actually select which department they want to reach. So that's something that we're work in progress.
Kelly, your other question? Reminder as we're starting to talk, Wendy Strack, Vice Chair, I didn't even forget. Yeah, we do have to say everything.
Sure, Kelly Anderson, public member. So Marlon, they get to the end of the phone tree, they leave a voicemail. Approximately how long does it take for them to get a call back?
So I don't know if we have like the statistics to show exactly. I know we are mandating our staff to try to contact people within, let's say, 2 or 3 days, depending on the value. Because each email box or each unit, they get a certain amount of value that comes in. So we try to get as early as, honestly, as early as we can. But we do not have any stats, particularly saying exactly, when we return those.
Yeah, those actually get, the voicemails now actually get translated and put into an email. So it actually goes into our email account. So like for each license unit and stuff, they will receive within their email actual account, they will receive the voicemails in that. So it'll get responded to like as almost, if they can, sometimes it's easier. We like to do, emails are great because then the respondent has an actual documentation of what we told them and they can refer back to it. So that's one benefit, but they will respond to those through like the email process kind of thing. So.
Yeah, I just want to like empathize with the customer service situation because I just know from like the entrepreneurial world that like it's a big place where a lot of companies, businesses, both in the public and private struggle, and that's why people like outsource, right, the call centers, and they're, I don't know like how much maybe you guys can learn from maybe like the private sector and like how they manage customer service, that whole department, because that's what I hear is what this is. And it does take a lot of technology and really thinking outside of the box. I know I've seen also some organizations use like Slack, where it's like a forum where people like post like their questions and then there are people answering. So it's like a community forum and people are seeing, but if it's like sensitive information, then that may not be the place for it. But it's really something that a lot of companies and organizations struggle with.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, like, are there limitations? Like, do all of your customer service needs have to be met by in-house by staff, or are there conversations of like getting a help from outside call centers?
Well, we do. I mean, actually, we did transition a while ago to help. DCA has their community, their information center in the CIC, which actually helped us out before, and that it's actually was a great actual. I think it was a great move for us to do that because they really do a good job of answering a lot of those questions, and they deal with a lot of like the renewal questions, logging on to Breeze, some of the more kind of technical aspects. So that was good. And then we have, like I said, we've created that escalation kind of process where we will address the more technical. If somebody has really like major questions that they can't answer, then we have like an a format for that. But no, I mean, I think it's stuff that we can do in-house. I don't necessarily believe we need to go outside. I mean, the department is very good at helping, maybe we can let the CIC what else they can do for us. Additionally, I mean, the other thing I'm looking at too is I think it's the interface, and I think people still, and I'm there too, I'm one of those people where you like to talk to somebody. So like I'm talking about looking at ways that we can actually utilize, the team system, like establishing some sort of like on-call for each unit. It's, I think, not necessarily our struggles, but it has been, kind of that we have evaluators that really we need them to evaluate to get these things done. At the same time, I mean, it's going to help if we have communication because then they can less possible, deficiencies in applications and stuff. So it's kind of that balance and weighing out how do we implement that. I mean, looking at additional staff members for a call center, that's an idea too. We could do that. The other thing I'm looking at, and it's not necessarily might not help necessarily with the, I guess with people's response time and their happiness or the customer service aspect of that, but looking at also utilizing something like a chat bot so that somebody has more of an interface where it's more, instead of just saying, go to our website, look at this, look at that, utilizing like a chat bot where they'd have an interface, which is a little more personal, not as much as the call, but it might actually utilize to get their answers quicker.
Yeah, like there are different levels, right? Because the chat box like will refer you to maybe an article or the place. So like for easy things to like navigate that maybe people that are not savvy, right, with like finding things on the website, and that would kind of eliminate those like easier questions, right? And then like you said, you have like a system for each level of need. So you're no longer doing the call center with?
No, we are.
Oh, you are.
No,
okay.
we are.
But there's even more.
I don't know if there's more, but I mean, there's always ways to explore that.
Because do we know like how people feel about the response time? Like, because we could feel like they're like, oh, we can handle it, we're good. But like, do we actually know what the consensus is out there? I don't know.
I know what the consensus is. No, I know. Okay. I mean, well, John, yeah.
If you look at almost every like public survey that we've done, outreach, feedback thing, that has been like number one on the list. Communication with the BBS. I don't get phone calls returned. I do get emails returned. Same thing shows up on social media. It's probably the most common question that's asked there. I actually am on, and I love watching the site. I do not respond as a board member because that's not my position to respond.
Thank you.
And it is an ongoing thing in almost every survey that has been out there for information about what people need. That has been.
Can we focus on that as far as like looking out what's working, what's not? Like break it down a little bit more.
We're working on it. It's a matter of implementing stuff, and that's sometimes is the problem because of staffing, because of workload and such. And we're not alone. I mean, it's other. If you look at any government agency, you can see the same.
Everywhere.
I mean, it's. I understand because even if not, I luckily don't have to deal with the bureaucracy, except for I work. Anyway. But if I call Comcast or something, yeah, it's frustrating if you can't talk to somebody. And I think that's where we really get I think where a lot of the negative feedback comes from, and I'm not saying it's not warranted, is people are going through this process of getting licensed. They're very anxious. They're wanting to know what to do. And if all they're getting when they come to the board and they're just getting redirected, it can cause, I would be upset too. And I think that's,
I see them as like a customer,
Yeah,
and
I
if
do too.
they're not able to determine where they stand or have their question answered, then like,
Yeah.
you know, um,
Well, and I think I mean, it's a really large scope. I think we've talked about this before. It's not only the call center, it's looking at the website, looking at how to make the website way more easier and
automated.
accessible, looking at possibly chat bots so people can find things more easy. Looking at, we've over the years implemented different things with just emails, with automatic responses with if, they get into the email box about CE, then they get a response back just to say, in the meantime, here are resources you can look at, and it gives you the links to the proper areas. We've, I know in assigning people just to kind of the way we work with, taking an evaluator off for a day and they're assigned to the emails that day. It's, we keep looking for a better way, and I definitely agree, there's more we can do. So, and we are looking at it, so. That makes sense.
I have one real direct specific thing, because I did not know the idea that a response to a voicemail might be responded by email. A real simple step you might be able to take is on that voicemail box, actually include the information, and your response may come in email. So please watch for, because if I get a BBS thing from an address I've never heard, it will immediately go into my spam or disappear. So maybe by letting people actually know that your response may come by email, so please keep track in your inbox and your spam folder, would be a real simple and direct thing that might help that communication shift be addressed by the people who are going through it. Because if you sent me an email from the BBS, it would go into my spam almost automatically. Not from you personally.
That's what's happening.
Any unknown address. Because I'm a business owner, I have to have huge filters on it.
And if it comes from like listserv or something, or it's like some random, we might have like a blast.
So that might be a real small action item that you guys could take to change that email so that people would know, oh, my response may become in a different form of communication.
Sure. And we've also included it so when someone gets to a specific box, in their voicemail message, we have included an email for them if they also want to contact us that way. So that's an additional thing that we've tried to do or we've done.
Strategic plan update. It's included in the materials for the review, and just kind of a note for the public, we did have a strategic plan, supplemental diversity, equity, inclusion, supplemental strategic planning session yesterday. And what we came out of that will be presented at a later meeting as a draft form. So you'll be able to see that at, I'm assuming, the May meeting. And the last thing, we had a conversation about this yesterday, and this is the BBS efficiency project. And so in June of 2021, we initiated an effort with the DCA Organizational Improvement Office to review the board's processes from licensing to enforcement. This effort included the Office of Information, the Office of Organization. Oh my gosh, why can I get that? Okay, let me stop my notes. That's the problem. I did my notes. I try to read out of that. So we worked with the Office of Organizational Improvement, and that's a DCA unit. And what they did is they sat down with our staff members and looked at approximately, it was like 45 different processes that we have within the board. And they mapped out everything with us. And this is with the actual evaluators or the person that's in charge of that kind of responsibility. And went through this whole workflow process. Once we actually mapped out the workflows, then we went through back again with the staff members to evaluate how long it takes to actually get each of those processes done, and then to identify areas, whatever those workflow processes, where we could actually, reduce the time, or what are things we could change in that process that would, what could we eliminate, or what could we improve? And that was a long process, and the report was finally finalized in December. and I have it with the report is attached in the materials. And some of the 4 overarching recommendations that they came up with is first, I think it's kind of obvious, is they said we should reduce the number of manual processes, which I agree. Second, make several adjustments to the Breeze functionality to improve efficiencies. Third, they said make several procedural changes to how the board processes its workload. And the last, communicate these changes consistently with staff. So what we're going to be doing is using these reports. Particularly, I really like the workflow for developing the workflow charts for developing new procedure manuals and to update procedure manuals that we have. We also are looking at currently right now an effort to look at some of the processes and procedures of the registration unit to seeing if we can update some of those processes. And as you know, we are making several changes to Breeze to keep utilizing the online format. And so hopefully we will be reducing some of those manual processes. So it was a kind of a good process to go through, and we'll continue to use that to make adjustments to our procedures and processes. Is there any questions on that?
None?
I think that's it. And that is, we did have a component in there, diversity, equity, inclusion update, and DCA. Thank you, Judy, for kind of giving us stole the Marlon's thunder, sorry. So we're gonna do that. And that's it for now. Okay.
Just going back a little bit to the schools. Well, first of all, do you guys get a lot of click on the newsletter? Are people opening those newsletters?
So that's one of the things that we haven't really had metrics on, which I want to start capturing is the news is our website traffic and stuff. We're looking at reports that we can run for that, so we can kind of better that.
Specifically the newsletter, we don't know. Oh, okay, that would be good to know, because maybe you know how we share like people that whose licenses, right, are
the enforcement.
The enforcement section. Maybe we could also include the school, the schools and their passing rates, right? And it's just like another way to inform the public about like what's happening, right? So, but you know, it would, more than 5 people need to be clicking on the newsletter for. So like if we can know, increase the marketing of that, I think people will start to notice like on their own with whatever it is they want to notice.
Maybe we can, that's something maybe we can bring to the workforce. I think I can see how we would want to proceed with that and stuff, because we do have to be but that would be something for further discussion.
Because it is public information. It's just another way of sharing for people that are not able to be at these meetings.
And that is online. The school pass rates and stuff is on our website. It might be hard to find because it's not it's in our materials, but it's also on, if you look in our exam section, we do a 6-month capture, and we do place it online. But you're right. I mean, like marketing, putting it out more for face forward kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nick, LPCC member. I'm curious, do you know if there's, so as it stands now, the only way folks are able to receive the newsletter is actually have to go to the board website and sign up to receive that. Is that correct? Or do they have other avenues to receive the newsletter?
I mean, well, they could click the links on social media. We put it out on listserv. So the listserv people, if you sign up for listserv, you will get the notification that it's out.
Do you know the number of individuals that are on the listserv or registered to receive the newsletter?
I don't. For some reason, I want to say like 3,000. So I don't know, but and then we have 30,000 on the Facebook, 30,000 there. I mean, we've always struggled because I mean people don't get engaged on the website, or that's why I get so excited about Facebook. It's like the most engagement we ever had. I mean, we put stuff out on the website, and
Because it's like a
Um,
snapshot of something you want people to see,
Yeah.
and they'll see it for a moment. And website is like a textbook. You
Yeah.
know, it's a lot to digest.
It is a lot to digest, and it's like, how do you get that in the form where it's easier to
Is there
digest
an
it?
opportunity to when folks are either registering to put an option on Breezy, someplace that's easily accessible? Because I know, like for me, for example, I had to go to the website because I don't really look at the social media stuff and had to like go and find that. I wonder if there might be an opportunity to make it a little bit more accessible for folks to have that information, because I don't know that there's a lack of interest. I think it's just potentially a lack of folks knowing where to go to find it.
But like, what information do you like? All
The newsletter,
information?
for example.
Newsletter. Okay, yeah.
Right,
I
'cause
mean,
that's a good consolidated.
I mean, that's stuff where with some of those, we put the alerts on top so they can see that the newsletter is out, or we put the alerts on there. But then, the combination with that is if you put the alerts on top, then it gets actually right now we do have quite a few alerts, and it looks a little bit busy, and it gets kind of confusing there. And yeah, I mean, we always are looking for ways and to do that. I mean, we could, I guess, a newsletter icon maybe. Yeah.
Pop-up screens are great for newsletters or anything you want people to see, right? We do that with the when we want people to know there's a new course, right? A CU requirement. So there are ways to put it in people's face.
Susan Friedman, public member. Is there a way, for example, that you could just mail the newsletter to the 142,000? Is that, I mean, it seems like you could just push a button and it would happen. No?
It would happen at a price. It would.
So it's a price that we can't afford.
I mean, you know what? I know what you're going to bring up. Are you going to bring up?
Because also email is going out of style. I mean, if you talk to young people today, they do not use email. And also, very few of them even use Facebook. They use Instagram. They communicate with each other through Instagram. I'm talking about people younger than all of us. But so the times are going to be changing all the time. I mean, the method of communicating is changing all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about you, but even I barely read my email.
Well, honestly, I don't go to the mailbox anymore because all I receive are ads. I'm like, yeah, it's something we got. There's a lot of ideas, and I think there's a lot of things that we are, in the background working on and stuff. And I mean, from my heart, I mean, like you're saying, these are our customers. Whether you're an applicant or registrant or licensee, you should get the service that you are paying for, and I do believe that, and that's something that I think I've explained it before. I don't take those, the comments. I mean, I take those in, and I understand the frustration. So.
Well, the newsletter is important because sometimes it has updates in the law, and people need to know that.
Yeah, and we'll keep trying to work on ways to get that out there.
Okay.
So
we want to make this maybe
Yeah,
the last, because we're getting up on 10:15, maybe looking for a break. So
Okay, perfect. John Sovek, quick answer to your question. Actually, all email newsletters have to be an opt-in situation. You can't just blanket send people email newsletters. It's a consumer protection piece of legislation that's in place. I think it's federal. So I just want to answer that for you. You have to opt in to receive an email. Same line, could you in communications always include, as you're applying for stuff, would you like to opt into our newsletter? Check, yay, we've captured a new email.
There might be a way to do that, actually.
Okay, so that's something. Then I'll talk to you I have something offline, then I'll talk to you.
Okay. Okay.
Any other questions about Steve's update from board members? Any questions from audience in the room? Moderator, can you open up the WebEx platform for any questions?
Absolutely. We are accepting questions via WebEx for the end of the report. Please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand. And mobile device users have 3 different pages. Use the ... button. at the bottom to find your hand button. And it looks like we have a hand up from one of our staff, Lisa. Hold on just a second. Go ahead, Lisa.
John's thing about the voicemail. Just so you know, the voicemail transcript comes into our email and our teams do respond to them via phone. We don't respond to the voicemail with an email. It's just the way it's transcribed to our office so that we can handle it. Okay?
Thank you.
This is John Sovek. You just got a big thumbs up. Camera. Yay!
Thank you.
All right. And that was our only request for comment online.
Okay,
Wendy?
thank you.
Wendy,
All right, I think,
I actually would like this on record. I'm sorry. It'll just take a second, I think.
okay.
So this is John Sovak, understanding we're all ready for our break. I would like to address a question I have in the strategic plan. It seems like objective 3.1, which is under the enforcement banner, I think. Let me just check. 3.
Yeah, it's enforcement.
3 is enforcement.
Yeah.
So 3.1, all of the action items on it seem to be stalled in a planned in bold. And I've seen so much action on so much of the rest of the strategic plan that's really commendable and amazing. I was wondering if there's some barriers that we're not aware of that are causing all of this stall in 3.1.
I mean, to be blatantly honest, time and resources. But we are actually on one of those. We are currently working on, I believe there's also in 3.1, the subject matter expert. The subject matter expert, we don't have it listed there now because we were just talking about this last week on increasing the pool of candidates so we can get a more diverse candidate. We're looking at increasing our fees that we pay out for subject matter expert because we think they're a little bit low, and we're thinking that an increase in those fees might actually drive some of the candidates or people, licensees that we need into the pool. And it's particularly what we're looking at is I think if we look at our SME population, it's probably people who are pretty much established. They're older licensees that have been in the profession, have the time to take off a day to actually participate or work on this as a subject matter expert. So we're thinking if we increase it, we might be able to attract some of the younger generation plus a lot more people. So that's one of the things we're looking at. So. And then we are talking about the other ones and trying to figure out like where to begin. So, okay, so.
Great, then we'll be looking for a 10-minute break. We'll make it a 12-minute break and we'll be back at 10:30. It is 10:31. So we will get going. Council, it's 10:31.
It's me too, huh?
We are back in session.
And about question you asked.
And we will be moving on to item 16. We're back in session. Board members. Item 16. The next item is discussion and possible action regarding the pathway to licensure survey. I will turn it over to Steve for this one.
Hi, good to see you again. So at the January 2019 Workforce Committee meeting, we discussed the idea of conducting a pathway to licensure survey. And the intent of the survey is to gain more insight into the possible barriers that an individual might face while on the pathway to licensure. So a draft of the survey was submitted to the workforce group, and the questions in the draft survey will focus on an individual's education, supervision, and examination experiences. The questions have been designed to collect information about the quality of an individual's master degree program in relation to an institution and method of instruction, the impact financial resources may have had on an individual's overall experience through the process of licensure, and possible barriers that might exist that they might have encountered while trying to obtain a supervisor or supervision. Also looking at the impact of possibly the type of setting where they got their supervision, and trying to find some more information on the extent of which an individual believes their education, supervision, or test preparation courses or testing were effective, or what kind of was barriers in those areas. So it's a pretty, it's not a very in-depth survey, but I think it's a good survey to start out to get some discussion points for our workforce committee. And so the attached draft was presented to the workforce committee. We made some edits to it. And what you're seeing today is a edited version of the survey questions. And so what I was hoping for is to get any more recommendations or suggestions on the actual survey itself. The intent is once we do get, if there is any other amendments, we want to try to get this out in March this month. So I'm hoping that I guess the motion would be to, make any amendments necessary and then submit the survey out. So we will go through our normal channels and publish it through social media and listserv, which I just saw. So I got corrected on that. Our listserv has around 16,000 people. So I was completely off on that. So thank you, Andrea. So we'll put that out through listserv and such. So I'm just going to open it for questions.
We'll do Justin and then Kelly.
Justin Hunt, question number 11. Can we change the wording so it's asking how easy it is? That would be consistent with the other questions. If you're asking how difficult, but then the highest number is how easy, that's inconsistent with the grading. And then also question 22. I want to just confirm that that's a select all that apply, like the other ones that are select all that apply.
Okay. Okay.
And then I would recommend asking for each one that they select to identify the extent to which they feel like it was a barrier. So that it's not just a binary this or that, but also identifying quantitatively how it impacted them. And then I also think that an open-ended question at the end asking, is there anything else we haven't explored that you think would be important for this?
Okay.
Thank you. Wendy Strack, Vice Chair, and just, I'm sure you've noticed the misnumbering on the, okay, all right, and then Kelly.
On 15, can you just check grammar? I think it's when you were under supervision, were you paid or did you volunteer?
Were.
Yeah, and then could we add, did your supervisor charge?
We have that as 17.
17?
Yeah, it's in there.
Did you pay for supervision? Okay, thank you.
Do we want to know more about their experience of how much they paid?
It looks like that one has a comment box that would allow them to share.
Okay.
Yeah.
The comment is only for how much though, but
I can put comment boxes in each one if we wanted to collect that.
Yeah.
Well, can you elaborate a little on their experience with paying?
Yeah, because like just because we think something is too much doesn't necessarily mean that person thinks it's too much. So just maybe adding a question about, do you think what you paid was fair or excessive? Or any other comments they want to make about that?
We do have, I don't know if it kind of if you can extrapolate it, because we ask, did you pay for your supervision? If they had a yes response, and the next one is how satisfied were you with your overall supervision? I don't know if you can extrapolate from that. If they say yes, and then looking at how satisfied they were, we might be able to kind of get it, I don't know.
Okay, because then they can comment and say whatever they want to say if they were dissatisfied.
Or we have a comment box there. I could put comments. I mean,
Maybe it could be
comments.
how much, and did you find the,
Was it
what was the
value?
relative
Was it
value
value?
of that cost or something? Did you find value in it? Something. Go ahead.
Negative value? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Nick,
Sorry.
LPCC member. I'm curious if, under education section, if we can ask a question. I don't want to keep adding questions, but I think it'd be important to also know if they felt their education program prepared them for the licensing exam.
We should have
Three.
Yeah.
Which one is it? Is it already?
Number A is, did your university educate? Oh, not educate. There's yeah. Did you expand? Where is it? We should have that in there.
I don't see a question in there that asks that. I see questions
Yeah,
related
no, okay.
to is it online?
I don't see it
no,
either.
I see, okay. I see. Yeah, we'll put that. It's similar to what we. Okay.
John, did you,
Yeah.
or you want to wait till?
No, I'm good. I'll go. Maybe under the financial question is using a scaling question about how much of a financial burden was paying for supervision. With one being, I don't know if we're going easy to difficult or difficult to easy, but actually ask, like, what's the financial burden for you? With like extremely financially difficult or not challenging. Abigail, would that kind of open up what you were curious about?
Yeah, I mean, because right, it's like a question asking how satisfied you are, and the other one's asking, was it a burden? So it's like the opposite. It's good.
But
To,
actually-
it's good to
actually-
have two, right? Two versions.
But actually asking the specific question,
Yeah.
was paying a financial burden for you?
Yeah.
Not, because that I think is different than satisfaction.
Clinically.
It's like I had an amazing supervisor and it was really hard to pay for that every week. Versus like, were you satisfied? Sure, I was satisfied, but now if I weigh in how much I paid, well, maybe I wasn't satisfied. So I think we might be getting two different pieces of information there that might help.
Justin Huff, on 8, can we change that to a scaling question rather than just did they, something along the lines of to what extent do you feel your university educated you about these following things?
Okay.
And 13, 14, and 15, I'm wondering if it would be more helpful for us to ask what % of your supervision was in each of these. We should add up to 100, but rather than just, did you experience this setting? I may have worked in a government agency, but for a month, and that doesn't really tell the DBS anything substantial.
That was 13, 14,
15.
And okay.
Also, I see that.
So 15 would be like, to what extent were you?
Oh, sorry.
Of your work was paid.
Okay.
I was going to say, Steve, item 28, I think answers my comment about education. I would just suggest we move it up under education versus examination. Or maybe not, I don't know.
Eleanor Uribe, LCSW, on 13, it could be a combination, right? For, was your supervision private practice, government, nonprofit? So maybe we could specify like maybe percentage or?
Yeah, that's what I
Oh,
think.
it was
I
year.
got that
Sorry, I
note.
missed that.
I've got it. I'll put like do percentages. And I see like the 28, I think that when I was coming down with the 28, 29, maybe fitting those on each of the different, moving 28 about asking if how effective was your education preparing you, putting that up in the education kind of section up there, and then moving the supervision one up to the same thing. So it's answered at the end instead of at the very end. If that makes sense. Okay.
Is this survey going to be, Justin Huff, is this survey going to be analyzed by the BBS staff, or are you sending it elsewhere in TCA, like the research?
That's a good question. I kind of, we originally it's just gonna, we can present the data, but there is a possibility which we could, I think OPS does offer, they have a research data analyst that we might be able to partner with them. So.
How about questions about like how effective or like the response, how responsive was like the BBS to people who need accommodations? Learning about if any of those things were barriers.
We could, yeah, I mean, we could put a question in there. Trying to think of the question would be, did the application process or trying to formulate that, but I could put a question in there. I think it would be formulated kind of, did you
were you informed about
maybe
of potential accommodations that, are people aware that they could do that on the first try? Do they have to learn that like the hard way, like second or third try?
Yeah, I'm trying to formulate. I think there's more just accommodations. I think there could be a question on there of even like the process. I mean, did your understanding how well did
they know these were options, that there were options?
Well, the accommodations, but also the licensure process. How well were you informed, or how well were you informed by the BBS on what you had, the steps that you needed to take? Did you know that?
Is the word familiar?
You
guys are trying to help you search for it.
I'm just trying to figure out like a question, and I guess we could do maybe in each of those. Well, except for, I don't know if we would have anything necessarily in the education section, but in the examination experience, we could, did you know about
how familiar were you?
Because there's the areas that I can see that would pose a problem, like you're saying, maybe not knowing about the accommodations, maybe not knowing how to even sign up for the exam.
And those are considered resources, right?
Well, when you have like resources for were you
accommodations?
Yeah. Accommodations for resources.
I think though, Abigail brings up a point that I think you're actually kind of
getting
into
trying
too.
to help, yeah.
So we have an education component, part of it. We have a supervision, next part of it, a test part of it. But I think we're like a companion holding their hand the whole time. There may actually be an entire BBS section.
Yeah, that's not.
Was the BBS helpful in your process? Did you feel informed by the BBS? Were you made aware of accommodations if they were necessary? That maybe there actually needs to be a section putting us into the survey as well too, because we are there the entire time.
So I could see, I think the things that I think looking at is just the real basics of, first of all, talking about was the BBS this is not going to be the language I want to use. How well did the BBS explain the licensure process? And then to that effect, at one point, licensure process, were you made aware, or something to the effect of, were you made aware of accommodations for examinations?
Maybe a question about at what point did you begin contact with the BBS and your path to licensure?
Oh, there's so many questions.
Yeah.
But I do think including the BBS,
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
like, we are there as part of the path. I mean, for
Yeah.
myself personally, I use the BBS website to investigate my schools. So my path to licensure with the BBS started before I even actually went to school.
Annette Walker, public board member. I'm feeling Steve's angst or your pain here.
Oh no, I'm like there's a lot of them.
It's kind of just coming up on the spot with a question here. I appreciate you doing that. I think this may fall under general questions, but to the survey itself, I think we want to keep it short and succinct, because if you send me for the first time something that's too in-depth, we might lose a few people. So, and I think you kind of expressed to us that this is our first time out doing this, and the purpose for how you ordered the questions. And so I think it's really, really good. And I appreciate the board's feedback. But I wouldn't want to extend it any greater than what it is right now. And some of the questions that we're getting into are really, I think, for an educated mass of folks, and we're not there yet. I think we're just trying to capture some basic information at this time to see where we go from there. Because I think we could definitely add what John is saying and some of the that Abigail is saying, because it's almost like tiers of information to almost get some of those questions in. Thank you.
Steve, on question 22, I'd like to mention, could we add location? Because I know it's been a challenge for some of our supervisees in rural communities. If you don't, when you think the respondents are going to get survey fatigue, don't worry about it, because they can put it under the comment box. It's just a thought.
I think that is an important aspect that I think maybe would fit in almost to, that can almost fit into every question, honestly. And I think we do have on a scale, do we have
right, you're right, because I don't want them to get survey fatigue, which is exactly what Dr. Walker said. So I'll just withdraw that.
Okay. I think there is, I'm sorry, I'm looking for one of the questions here where we ask kind of what, I kind of like the idea of, because that is part of that is a barrier, that could be a barrier. And then fitting itness and
Annette Walker, public board member, but not to belabor the point here. When you have a comment box there, we may even get more information than that. But if we know that is definitely.
And then to speak to with the accommodations and stuff, I think those are things we know. Definitely, as we talking about communication, we know, getting in contact with the board. I know that our website, thinking of that, understanding the licensure process. I recognize that, maybe a barrier or what we can do to increase that. So this is really kind of to look at their experience, just as the whole process.
Again, Annette Walker, public board member, to your point earlier, you may want to add a comment box to every question.
We can do that.
Right?
Any other questions or comments on this? Okay, Seeing none, are there any comments or questions from the in-person audience? Seeing none, moderator, do we have any comments from remote participants?
We are now accepting public comments on 16 via WebEx. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise that hand by tapping the hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. For our mobile device users, you may need to find that ... button, the ellipses button at the bottom, in order to find your hand button. And it looks like our first request for comment comes from Lisa. Hold on just a moment, Lisa. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone. As a reminder, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak with a 15-second warning.
Lisa Weininger, hi, LPCC. I'm also a doctoral candidate in counselor education and supervision. In that role, I mentor quite a few out-of-state students who are planning on moving to California, and also just in general, California resident students who are navigating this process. I love that you're doing this. I have a bunch of ideas. I realize that a shorter survey is better. I'm just going to rattle these off, and I think this is recorded so you can go back and listen if you need to from this list. In no particular order, a question: how long from day one of your school to licensure? How long did it take you to go through the process if you're finished? A question: how easy was it to find a practicum site? A question: if you moved to California during licensure, did that create obstacles? A question: did you have any, when you went for the application for the license, did you have any of your hours rejected by the BBS, and why? A question similar: did you get your application for registration or licensure kicked back for any deficiency, and why? Which I know the BBS probably knows that already. A question: who did you rely on for guiding you through this process? So those are the ones. I also wanted a question about, did you get minimum wage if you were paid? But I crossed that one out. I think these questions for me are coming from my experience of the stress points as I went through my own process, and the places where there's a lot of confusion and delay. So that's what I was coming from, and also the places where
15 seconds.
Where the BBS could potentially do further research on them, like the one about who guided you. And will this data be available to outside researchers? I'm going to send an email about that separately. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, just on that last question, it will be brought, it'll be public once we get this back.
Thank you.
All right, our next request comes from Kathy Atkins. Hold on, Kathy. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone.
Hello, Kathy Atkins from CAMPT. I just had 3 quick food for thought, and I walked away for a second, so if someone else said this, my apologies. Just for number 1, I didn't know if you were getting trainee data. I know that the BBS doesn't, regulate, but I don't know if that's helpful. I believe the other speaker spoke to something about trainees as well. On number 15, I don't know if you have any interest in gaining data of if they're paid from W-2 versus 1099. We at CAMP continue to hear about a lot of supervisees that are paid by 1099. I wouldn't want anything to, get them in trouble, and that's not why we would want them to report. So I don't know how anonymous it is, but just to gain data, if you see that a large portion of this, I don't know if the survey has the logic throughout it that says, the trainee or the registrants answered versus licensees. But if it does, it might be nice to see if there's a large percentage still being paid by 1099. And then on number 28, I believe it asks if the education program was effective, but right above it, it talks about the prep programs. So because of number 30, I believe number 28 means the master's program, but you might just want to say something like master's education or something along those lines. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And looking around for any last hands, it does not appear we have any. I think we are ready to continue.
Thank you. Back to board members in the room. Eleanor?
Eleanor, LCSW. I was thinking maybe the other thing is prefacing it, letting them know it's anonymous, or another thing might even be, we have a lot of researchers, so maybe even running some stuff through them to see, hey, is there maybe a recommended standard way that might be good, but.
Any other board member additions? It seems like that a lot of the suggested additional questions by public comment could be, as Dr. Walker suggested before, maybe some things that we include in future surveys, just when we get kind of the baseline data, and then we can start digging in on some of the more detailed questions.
Can I ask one addition to that I did bring up that I thought would be kind of an interesting question, which would, I think, go into because it is talking about licensure pathway. And this kind of relates to the BBS and stuff in a way where I liked the concept of, or the question she brought up is, who did you rely on for your information?
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I think that might be interesting to see.
Yes.
And then putting, BBS, your supervisor, your school, your associations or whatnot, because then that would help us out with kind of looking at if that's okay.
Eleanor, LCSW. So I would almost say, even if you might even want to put in parentheses, something like that to give them, jot their memory.
Yeah, just make it an open question, like an open comment box, but make some suggestions within the question.
Yeah, I can say the three and then, a comment or other or whatever to that effect.
Kelly?
Wendy, based on the conversation, I would move that the executive officer make all requested modifications with the board to the survey, formalize and distribute.
Second, Justin.
Great. Looks like we have a motion and a second. So, Christina, will you take the vote?
Yes.
Matter of order, Madam Chair?
Yeah. Yeah, sorry.
Might need to take public comment before. I'm not your legal counsel, but I believe that's the rule.
Yeah, he needed it.
Thank you. She is indicating to me with her face. So, all right. So we have a motion and a second. Are there any comments in the room? Any moderator? Thank you for the heads up. Any comments online?
This is your call to raise your hand. Please tap that hand button at the bottom of the screen if you'd like to make a comment on the motion. Dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. And as a reminder to our mobile device users, there's a ... button at the bottom of the screen if you're having trouble finding the hand button. We're going to take just a few seconds to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the motion?
Yes, thank you. All right, now we'll take a vote. Thank you, Christina.
Dr. Nick White,
Yes.
Susan Friedman,
Yes.
Eleanor Uribe,
Yes.
Abigail Ortega,
Yes.
Dr. Annette Walker,
Yes.
Justin Huff,
Yes.
John Silver,
Yes.
Wendy Stratt,
Yes.
Kelly Ramapina,
Yes.
motion carried.
Thank you. All right, our next item is 17, discussion and possible action regarding proposed amendments to the Business and Professions Code. Roseanne, I think we are.
So it should be telehealth. It should be.
Oh.
Is it on?
Oh, right, the regulations titles.
I'm really off. Okay, hold on. Let me just go to the agenda themselves.
This is number 8.
Okay. Let me just pull up the agenda.
The website doesn't match the number.
The website agenda is not.
Okay, so we.
Item 8 on on the web.
On the agenda, the material 17.
Okay, so we have in our box, we have an agenda that goes to, right, to telehealth regulation. Okay. Where is that?
Where is it?
Okay.
No, that's-
All right. Yeah, okay. So this one
That's
is not an
17,
item
item
at all
17.
on this agenda. I don't know what this is.
Wait.
Okay,
hold on,
so
don't-
let's try again. Item 17, or is it item 8? Okay, so it's discussion and possible action to initiate a rulemaking to amend the board standards of practice for telehealth regulation.
Thanks, Wendy.
Sorry
So
about that.
our board's telehealth committee wrapped up its several year run. It met from January 2021 until December 2023. And the committee started and ended with a review of our board's telehealth regulations. At the beginning of the committee, we looked at them. The committee discussed and what changes it might like to see at the time, and then resolved that at the end of the committee, when everything was wrapping up, that it would take another look at those, and then we would go from there in terms of what amendments may be needed based on the evolution of telehealth over time, which is a lot. A little bit of background, our telehealth regulations that we have right now were adopted in 2016. Before that, the law offered very little guidance about telehealth, and it was starting to increase in the amount that it was used. And so there was only very basic guidance in Business and Professions Code section 2290.5 at the time. And so the board at that time proposed telehealth regulations because it thought that more guidance was needed. And so that's how we got to where what we have today. But obviously, as things have evolved over the past several years, 2020 in particular, there was the thought that they need to be reconsidered. So what the committee decided to propose is shown in attachment A of the documentation we have today. And there were four separate proposed amendments that you see today. Going through them, the first one is replacing the term valid and current. In 1815.5A, the law currently requires that a valid and current California license or registration is required. And we started discussing exactly what is a valid license. And according to the board's regulations council, that means a license, typically it means a license that is current, active, and unrestricted. We didn't think that that's really the intent of the board to restrict someone on probation from doing therapy via telehealth, unless their specific terms of probation for some reason prohibit them from doing telehealth. That's not the overarching goal. So the telehealth committee recommended replacing the requirement that a license be valid and current to engage in telehealth, to instead require the license be current and active. And they felt that more accurately described the requirements. That's one of the changes that you see. Item number 2 that you're seeing changing is in 1815.5T3. The regulations currently require that each time a therapist provides services via telehealth, they must utilize industry best practices for telehealth to ensure both client confidentiality and the security of the communication medium. Over the course of the telehealth committee, stakeholders provided feedback that the term industry best practices is a vague term, and it really leads to confusion about how exactly that requirement is interpreted and fulfilled. What exactly are industry best practices in alignment with law? So the committee discussed further clarifying how the standard was noting. We looked at several different options. Last year, the Med Board had actually some clarification about that in a bill, where their law said that they needed to, the practitioner of telehealth needed to ensure that the technology, method, and equipment used to provide veterinary medicine services complied with all current privacy protection laws. So the committee kind of liked that, but that's in statute, and our regulatory council pointed out that actually in regulations there's a standard where you have to be more specific about what privacy protection laws are being referenced. So we worked to kind of use that as a template and make that a little bit more specific. So you're going to see some language in there today where we remove the term industry best practices, and we basically say that use that language, but then cite the laws and regulations that would include. So you'll see that. Item number 3 of what we changed, we replaced some gendered pronouns that were in the law with gender neutral pronouns. Whether we update that as we touch different code sections and update them. And then finally, item 4 was to look at subdivisions 1815.5E and F. Subdivision E currently states that a California licensee or registrant may only provide telehealth services to a client in another jurisdiction if they meet the requirements to lawfully provide services in that jurisdiction and the other jurisdiction allows it. And the reason that we included that subsection when we originally established the telehealth regulations was because there was a lot of confusion or just not being aware that each state has their own requirements for telehealth. And if you're practicing with a client in another state, it is generally required that you follow that jurisdiction's laws. They have jurisdiction over clients that are located in their state. But a lot of people weren't aware of this, and so we wanted to make sure that we kind of guided people that they weren't inadvertently breaking the law without realizing it. So we added that piece in there. And then regulation section 1815.5F goes on to say that failure to comply with any of the provisions of the telehealth regulation is unprofessional conduct. Hampton raised a concern that stating it was unprofessional conduct if a therapist fails to check with another state is too rigid and could lead to unintended consequences. Somebody could be transitioning to a new therapist or just not aware, and then we would take disciplinary action, which we wouldn't actually take disciplinary action unless the other state took disciplinary action. But we just wanted to put that in there for awareness. So we kind of talked about it with Regulations Council, and Regulations Council pointed out that violation of any of the board statutes and regulations is already unprofessional conduct. And that's actually in our unprofessional conduct statutes for each of our practice acts. So we just determined that 18.15.5F, it says violation of the telehealth regulations is unprofessional conduct is unnecessary and decided to strike it. If a practitioner didn't check with another state, and we got a complaint about it, there wouldn't really be much that the board could necessarily take action on pertaining to that. It would be kind of case specific on what happened. If the other jurisdiction ended up saying, yes, you violated our laws and they took disciplinary action, then the board would look at it and determine whether disciplinary action was necessary here. But it's not really necessary to state that if you don't do this, it's going to be disciplinary action. So that's where we landed on that. At its January meeting, the Policy and Advocacy Committee discussed the telehealth regulations that the telehealth committee had proposed and recommended that the board approve the proposed regulatory text and initiate a rulemaking as provided for the language provided in attachment A. So that's where we are today. I'll open it up for discussion. We have a very specific set of motions depending on how the discussion ends up. So once a motion is made, I can read the motion that we need to have.
So there's a couple things that I'm trying to reconcile here, and I wonder if it's a bit of an inflection point. So when I'm looking at the standards of practice, it mentions that it includes, where's it at here? It includes those that are defined within the BBC 4999.46.3 as a definition of who's a health provider, which I'm looking at particularly attachment B. Within that, it mentions that within the BBC code of 229.5, it includes that particular code. But if you look at the definition, it includes trainees. So there's this, kind of the point that I brought to the last board meeting is we have no clue who these trainees are, but they're expected to follow this guidelines, but it's not captured in this amendment. So I'm going to be curious how this is going to shake out, because there's a ton of telehealth being provided in training institutions that the board has no clue about.
That's true. This actually came up at the Policy and Advocacy Committee. We went back and met with legal counsel, and it was determined that yes, 2290.5, which is a statute which overrides regulation, permits trainees to do telehealth. However, because the board does not license or regulate trainees, that we don't actually have any authority to require them to do this because they're not under our jurisdiction. And I'll let Chrissy Shields, our attorney, she's here. I think she wants to weigh in as well.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind. Christy Shield, Regulations Counsel for the board. I think we've spoken through the computer and WebEx, but nice to meet you in person finally. I was actually BBS's board counsel in the early 2000s, so I've been around for a while, but I think the issue here is that when we have to adopt a regulation, we have to meet 6 standards. One of them is non-duplication, the other one is necessity. And so because the law that respects trainees and how they can administer telehealth is already covered in 2290.5, there's a duplication issue there. First of all, because the authority is granted not by regulation, not by the board, by state law. They can do it. So they're not in the regulation because number one, as she indicated, we don't have jurisdiction over trainees, they're unlicensed. But also 2290.5 is the authority for them to use telehealth, and the requirements in that statute are what govern how they practice under supervision. So that's why we haven't included them in here, because we were concerned that OAL, the Office of Administrative Law, is the agency that approves regulations for state agencies. They would review anything you approve to approve or disapprove the action you're taking. They might say, why is this in here when you don't have authority over unlicensed persons, except for unlicensed activity, of course. If they violate those provisions, you're able to issue a citation. And these authority issues are already covered, and their requirements are covered by law in a statute. And I didn't know what arguments we could make other than we could maybe reference that except as provided in 2290.5 of the code for trainees. These are the requirements for telehealth. So that all of the requirements for people that might be associated with practice are in one location. That would be our argument to OAL. So if you're interested in adding that at the beginning of subdivision A of this section, we could do that.
Yeah, I would. I mean, I think that's a real deficit of the board.
Okay.
You know, is that we just, yeah, it's a huge consumer protection issue. We just don't know what's going on in the field with these trainees. We just don't know this unless they're an MFT, you know, an associate or trainee in MFT, because the board's regulating social workers and counseling trainees. We have no clue. And we're just trusting that educational institutions are in good faith doing what they're supposed to be doing. And I can anecdotally say that's probably not always happening. And so I think if there's any way we could somehow capture that in some capacity, I think it would be important.
So we've been putting that notice in there simply to allow everyone who is under your jurisdiction, so this people, any supervisors that might be involved, would know, oh, I better look at that law to see what the trainee requirements are for practicing in telehealth.
Yeah, I think that would be good. Any way that we might think about creatively to do that would be, personally, I think, very important.
Concerns with that addition to subsection A of this proposal. In attachment A, we would add except as provided in section 2290.5 of the code for trainees, comma, all persons engaging in the practice, blah, 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 the rest.
Yeah, because it would be almost in direct conflict with how it's worded now, right? Because it's saying that we're following this section as defined by this section, but then we're not capturing it under the regulation, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yeah, the regulation is supposed to implement and interpret and make more clear what the law states or add additional authority. The problem is you don't have any authority over the trainees, but there is a law that governs how trainees can provide telehealth. And I've used this argument before for other boards where we didn't have jurisdiction, and there was, really no need for us to add it because we're not adding authority to ourselves.
Right.
It's already authority out there in law. But to avoid confusion in the regulated community, we're putting this in there so everybody's aware of where all the requirements are for everyone that practices in this area. That would be jurisdiction over. So would that be okay? Everyone? Okay with
Dr.
that?
Walker?
Yeah, Annette Walker, public board member. Isn't that captured under background in the beginning of your summary here? Where you do, is that 2290.5? Is that the same?
Well, I mean, the language that you adopt is on page 17-7. The background material is support for this text right here, but it's not regulation. So in order for it to have any kind of legal impact at all or official legal notice from the board, we would need to put something to kind of notify people that there is this other statute that governs other persons that we don't regulate that may affect how our licensees practice. Because if you're supervising a trainee and you don't ensure that 2290.5 is followed, you could be subject to disciplinary action. So,
I guess I'm following the logic of referencing that particular, is it a statute?
2290.5, the telehealth. It's for all the healthcare providers in the department.
What is it formally referred as?
Business and Professions Code Section 2290.
Okay, that there, that's why, but yeah, okay, I'm seeing that. To me, Roseanne kind of captured that for me, but I'm not quite sure what your intent is.
Well, my intent is that if you look at the section 229.05, it includes BPC section 499.95, which defines what a healthcare provider is. And that's what council's saying is that because under that definition includes both associates, licensed, registered, and a trainee, but the board doesn't regulate trainees, but we're defining them within this section. See what I'm saying? Yeah. And so it creates this thing where we have law that says one thing, but then we have regulation that says another.
So we're just putting in here in one location all the telehealth requirements so that we're pointing to that section to make the regulated community aware.
Yeah, that's my point.
Additional authorities and
that,
requirements for practice that are not just in this regulation.
That's what I'm getting. That's the intent. So
And I think the amendment makes it clear.
Yeah, got it.
So the trainee takes on no new power by
us adding that.
So that's not the way the statute works.
Right.
Yeah, I see.
Any other questions?
Or LCSW, it kind of reminds me of the mandated reporting. So if you're supervising somebody, you're, just making sure that it gets covered.
Right.
It's helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
There are any other questions?
Well, does anyone want to make a motion before we take public comment, or do you want to take public
Yeah.
comment? Make a motion.
Well, because let's make a motion first, then we only have to do public comment once, so.
17.
Council, can you help me craft that language as part of this motion?
So we're looking at motion B on page 17-4. And it would be to approve the proposed regulatory text as presented in attachment A with the following change. To add the phrase, except as provided in section 2290.5 of the code for trainees, comma, before the word all, and in subsection A. In addition, submit the approved text to the Director of the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Business Consumer Services and Housing Agency for review. And if no adverse comments are received, authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to initiate the rulemaking process, make any non-substantive changes to the text of the package, and set the matter for a hearing if requested. If after the 45-day public comment period, no adverse comments are received, and no public hearing is requested, authorize the executive officer to take all steps necessary to complete the rulemaking and adopt the proposed regulations for Title 16, California Code of Regulations, Section 1815.5, as approved at this meeting.
Okay.
Okay, Nick, so can you repeat that?
I am sorry that this law, but it's something we've developed over the years with the Office of Administrative Law. They used to challenge us on whether you actually approve the text that we
Got
submitted,
it.
and we have to prove that we have like breadcrumbs and a trail connected with the lengthy motion.
So we have a second.
Second.
Walker?
I was,
Or-
he used his voice, it's okay.
Okay,
He's
so
got
Justin,
it. I
second?
raised my hand.
Okay, Justin?
Yeah.
Christina, will you open the bill?
Oh, public comment.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
Oh, my
Thank
goodness.
you.
Okay. Any public comment in the room?
Thank you, Ben Calderon, MFT. Roseanne, thank you for your work on this. I've been one of those saying that standard about industry best practices was vague and confusing for licensees. So I really appreciate your work and the work of the committee to bring us to where we are now to get some clarity there. It's really helpful. Also, Board Member Boyd, I appreciate you raising the trainee issue. I agree that the prior language looked like not just omission, but contradictions. So again, thank you for getting clarity and then the amendment to that to make it good and specific and inclusive. The only other note is that in paragraph D3.2, HIPAA is misspelled. Should be HIPAA.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We don't have to revise the motion, it's part of the
Nonsense, the non-substitute.
That's me being dyslexic.
Any other comments in the room? Moderator, do we have any comments on WebEx?
We're now open for public comment via WebEx. It's time to get the hands up if you hadn't put them up already. There's a little hand button at the bottom of your screen. For dial-in users, please dial *3 to raise your hand. And mobile device users, please use the ellipses button, the ... in order to find the hand button if you are having trouble. And it looks like our first request comes from Kathy Atkins. Hold on just a moment. We're going to send you a request to unmute your microphone. You'll have 2 minutes to speak, and I'll give you a 15-second warning.
Hi, Kathy Atkins from Camped. I appreciate the board bringing up the trainee issue as well. I guess my brain doesn't work quite as quickly as everyone else here today. So I do feel like I need a little bit more time to sort of look at this change in writing and ensure there's not something, an unintended consequence or conflict elsewhere. Nothing comes to mind at the moment, but if there is any concern, certainly since this is going to public comment, we can make it at that time. So I just wanted to say thank you for bringing it up. And if we do have any concerns, we will bring it to Roseanne and Steve and the board through public comment. Thank you.
Do we have any other comments from remote participants?
That was
our
our only,
moderator.
my apologies. That was our only request for public comment.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other board comments before we vote? Okay, Christina.
Kelly Bonafini,
Yes.
Ruby Strauss,
Yes.
John Covet,
Yes.
Justin Huff,
Yes.
Catherine Alford,
Yes.
Abigail Ortega,
Yeah.
Eleanor Uribe,
Yes.
Susan Freeman,
Yes.
Dr. Nick Boyd,
Yes.
motion carries.
And we have arrived at the lunch hour, described for 11:30. We're going to go ahead and take our break. We will resume the meeting at 12:30. The Board of Behavioral Sciences meeting. We have next on our agenda maybe item 18, Presentation of the, regarding the regulatory process. Christy, I think it's you.
Yeah, we have some slides. Yeah. So you guys got a little bit of education from Christy on that last agenda item on telehealth, but I'm going to give you sort of a better sense, a more thorough sense of the process. I mean, bear with me, I'll turn this. It is detailed, but I'll turn this to go ahead and move to the next slide. We'll talk about what is a regulation. You guys know this. It has a force of law. There's a definition in the Administrative Procedures Act, which we'll get to. Our regulations are in Division 18, Title 16, California Code of Regulations. I'm stating to follow the process specified in the Administrative Procedures Act. Next slide. So this is how a regulation is defined in the Administrative Procedure Act. So it basically means any rule, regulation, or standard general application by a state agency that makes specific or interprets a law that we administer or that governs our procedure. So any rule that we apply generally to our regulated population is considered a regulation. Next slide. So why are regulations necessary? They are necessary whenever a law enacted by the legislature is not self-executing, and which means a regulation is needed to implement, interpret, or make the law more specific. Next slide. So here's an example on the next slide of a statute, passed by the legislature that's now in the Business Professions Code. So an example says the board may set an application fee up to $500. So what is that fee? Is it $20 or $499? So in that case, we need a regulation that says what the fee is. Sometimes, next slide, a statute is subject to more than one interpretation, and it needs to be clarified. So to qualify for licensure, an applicant shall have 3,000 hours of supervised experience. So what does that look like? Who can supervise? Lots of questions about what that means. So a lot of that, as you know, if you've seen those specifics about supervision, there is quite a lot in our statute and the Professions Code, but most of it is in our regulation. And then the regulation has to meet certain standards. So when we are talking about regulations, when we want to proceed with something, next slide, please. We have to make sure that when we are writing that text, it meets 6 standards. So authority, which is one of the things that Christy was talking about with that telehealth. Is that something in the board's purview? Is there a basis in our statute for this regulation? It has to be clear. It has to be consistent with other laws and with our laws. It has to be necessary. It has to not duplicate something strictly. And reference basically means the sections of law that are being interpreted and implemented or made. Okay, next slide. So just to give you an idea of the process, once you as a board approve regulation text and you give that big long motion and get the okay for it, the next step, after I prepare all the documents, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit too, but just so you get an idea of the process from here, DCA has several steps. They have their legal affairs office with our reg counsel, Christy, and their staff. DCA budgets will review, the DCA director will review, and once we've got those approvals, it goes to agency. And then if there's a fiscal or economic impact, it goes to State Department of Finance, and then the final step is the Office of Administrative Law. Next slide. The initial steps, so kind of back to the beginning really here of the concept for something we want to maybe create or draft a regulation. So the need for a regulation is identified by staff or stakeholders. You all know this process. You've been through it, you've seen it, but and then we have to figure out, is this better in statute? Should we run legislation, or do we have the ability to do it through legislation? And there isn't, sometimes legislation is the way to go. But regulation, there's a little more of a narrow, like I said, you have to have a basis in your statute to be able to run a regulation. So But basically, this is the whole committee process and board process, and then which ends up in board. And then next slide, please. So that's the concept phase. Then there's the production phase. So before it starts the process, well, actually, here we work hand in hand and through the whole process, really, with DCA Legal, with our reg attorney. But at this phase, we are preparing the required production documents that are going to start its review through that whole process through DCA agency. So we write up the notice, which is the notice to the public of here's what we're proposing. Described it in kind of general terms, and then there's the initial statement of reasons, which describes the purpose of why we're doing the regulation, the rationale, so why is it needed, and the benefits that are anticipated. So that's a very in-depth document for every little piece that we're changing or newly implementing. We have to detail those. There's fiscal and economic impact statement, then there's the request form we submit to OAL. So we prepare all those documents, and it starts its way through that process. Next step, next slide. So once they, DCA Legal Director Agency, so that we're still kind of early here at this point in the rulemaking process. There are a lot of steps. So now we submit these documents to OAL. They have to give sort of an initial approval, and then the public receives notice. So those are all these steps before we even tell the public, hey, we're proposing these regulations, which our stakeholders here may have already heard about it through this process, but now it's the formal notice to the public, and there's a 45-day public comment period. If we get any public comments during that 45-day period, they come back to us, and we bring them to the board. Staff will prepare some proposed responses where the board can consider, okay, we got this comment, staff is thinking this is how we respond, we agree. So it goes through that process at a public meeting. We haven't seen a lot of that because we don't do a ton of regulations, but we do have some in the pipeline right now. So like our unprofessional conduct regulations, which is a really small package that's going through, just making, it's the one with the Confidentiality of Medical Information Act, some months back. That's right now in public notice. So you can actually go to our website under pending regulations and want to look at what the notice looks like, the initial statement of reasons. That's kind of a good one to look at because it's not super in-depth and long. Anyway, so if after that public comment period, we might determine at our board meeting that there are changes necessary, we want to make changes to that proposed regulation. Or maybe we don't, we feel like the comments are something that either aren't really pertinent or, but if we do decide that, if the board does decide that there are changes, then we have to do a modified notice out to the public. So there's another public comment period, so that's 15 days in that case. Next slide. And then now we have the final steps. I will compile the final package, which includes the responses to the comments. We submit the package for final review. So it goes through a similar process as in that initial review phase. So it goes through DCA Legal, the director, agency, Department of Finance if there's fiscal. And then if it gets approved through all that, then it goes back to OAL and they have that final say. So then they do a really in-depth review at that point. And then if OAL approves it, and sometimes they'll have changes, it just kind of depends. If they approve it, then it's filed with the Secretary of State, and then it takes effect on the specified date. It could be quarterly. We could request a certain date, or that it be, take effect immediately. It just kind of depends on how we want to do it. If for some reason OAL does not approve the regulation or requires revisions, we can withdraw it, or we can resubmit it to OAL after making the changes that they've requested, which also means another public comment period. Keeping the public, informed through all of this is a really critical piece of it. And then next slide. So that's that whole process, but I also want to talk about what is an underground regulation. So, going back to the definition of what a regulation is, it says a general rule or a standard of general application. Say the state decides to just, well, actually, I'm going to give you an example. So basically, when a state agency sets a general rule or standard that it applies to its regulated population, but that rule or standard is not set in the law, then it's considered an underground, well, OAL may consider it as an underground regulation. There are some exceptions in the law, but somebody can challenge that via petition to OAL and say, hey, we think this is an underground regulation. The state is trying to do this and they don't have no regulation saying this. So I think the next slide has an example. You move to the next slide. So here's an example. So say that the law, our law does. I tried to give us a real world example. So our law required the board of regulated licensees to provide a written notice to clients before initiating services. The law says that the delivery of the notice must be documented. So the board, we can suggest best practices for documentation, but we cannot say you have to do it this way without a regulation and going through all of that process. And that's it. I don't know if I talked too fast here or moved too fast, but that also didn't want to drag you down too much because I know it's kind of technical, but it is a very technical process. And not easy sometimes, but we're very lucky to work with Christy and the legal office and provide such good guidance because it can be tricky and there's so many different steps. So.
Thank you, Christy. Do we have any questions or comments from the board? Looks like you were,
I just want to thank regulatory council for being
It's the Christie team.
The
Christie team.
And
I have to mention, literally went through that presentation. It was a good presentation, but the work, it doesn't really reflect, and I know you all know, the work that goes into that, as you can see.
Much harder than it looks.
It's incredible, especially keeping track of all the changes and stuff, and having to actually make sure that those get to OHL and stuff appropriately. It's amazing. So,
I shouldn't ask us late in the afternoon, Dr. Annette Walker, public board member. So again, we applauded you and congratulated you this morning on your promotion, correct?
Thank you.
So this is the department that you're managing.
Yes.
Right.
And she's been doing this work
actually,
but at a level that's way beyond.
I'm trying to make the connection with, so how does it change your area or what you've been doing?
It doesn't change it a lot. It just gives me a different level of responsibility and independent functioning, I guess we would call it. Now that I've had these years of experience, about 10 years at this point.
Okay. Is this a new position?
So it is a new position, and the management level is really at that management level. It's like you said, independent work. You really have oversight, and so up to like the executive officer or higher. And so, honestly, Christy has been operating under that she was an assistant government program analyst, have been doing that full on work. And so it's kind of, and also I think the work that we have moving forward and stuff really does, she was well deserved.
Yeah, no, we appreciate you. I totally am reading in between the lines here. So glad this worked out for the benefit of all. Yeah. Thank you.
And council, thank you too for your
Goes without saying. Gosh, she's glowing.
It's a big hug for everybody.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for your hard work.
Yeah.
Any comments from the audience? Moderator, do we have any comments by remote participants?
For our WebEx users, now is the time to raise your hands. Please tap that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users, dial *3 to raise your hand. And for our mobile device users, tap that ... in order to find your hand button. We're going to look around for just a few seconds to see if we have a request, and then we're going to move forward. Seeing no requests, do you wish to continue?
Yes, thank you. Okay, moving on to item 19, update on board rulemaking proposals. We're going to stay with the Christie today. Go.
So the two regulation proposals that the board has approved is what I'm reporting on. The disciplinary guidelines are in preparation for the DCA initial review process. It's taking some time because that initial statement of reasons, it's a big package. So I'm at 80 pages already on the initial statement of reasons, and we've got a ways to go still. So anyway, so I'm hoping to get that started through the process in the next month. The unprofessional conduct regulation was noticed to the public on February 2nd, and that public comment period ends on March 25th. So once that ends, we'll get through the rest.
Meaning, Kelly?
Not yet.
Any other questions from board members? Seeing none, any questions from the audience? Moderator, do we have any questions from remote participants?
We are once again open for public comment via WebEx. If you'd like to make a comment, raise a hand by tapping the hand button. Dial in users, dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. I think I saw a hand flash up and then disappear again. If you intended to raise your hand, please try it again. I believe that was from Kathy. We're going to wait just a few more seconds. All right, no requests for comment.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, next on our agenda is item 20, discussion and possible action regarding proposed amendments to board-sponsored legislation, SP 1024, Ochoa Vogue, and all the stuff that follows.
So the board is sponsoring a bill this year, and that is SB 1024. We have found an author. It is going to be Senator Ochoa Vogue, and the bill has been introduced. The board approved the language. It's currently in the bill and it's meeting on this past November. So the time is kind of a refresher. As written right now, the bill proposes two changes to the Foreign Practice Act. One is changes to the requirements regarding physical display of the license and registration. Right now, all licensees and registrants have a paper copy of the license or registration that has their name, their license number, type of license expiration date, and it's required to be displayed in a conspicuous place in their primary place of practice. And so the law was written like that many, many years ago when everybody was pretty much practicing in an office. And it was easy for the client to see on the wall and on the desk that there was a copy of a license there. That's changed a little bit since then. So there's been some suggestions that the law needs updating to accommodate telehealth. It is not so easy to see a license displayed in the background on a little screen if you're doing therapy via telehealth. So the board discussed and proposed the requirement to remove the requirement to physically display the license or registration and instead provide in the written notice therapists are required to give to client before initiating therapy services. So that's where that proposal stands. The second thing we're trying to do with that bill is clarify who qualifies as a supervisee for the purpose of gaining supervised experience. Hours the law in a couple of places limits supervisors to supervisees per supervisor to 8 people in a group supervision, and the total number of supervisees that a supervisor can have in non-exempt settings is limited to 6. But there was some questions about what exactly a supervisee means, and so we're making some amendments to clarify that. It could be a variety of different things. Not clear what the law includes and what it doesn't include. So that's the bill as it currently stands now. When we were shopping the bill, we ran the bill by a number of different authors, and also the legislatures, both of the legislature's Business and Professions Committee in the Senate and the Assembly, and also Legislative Council had to officially draft the proposal, which means they take a look at the legislature's legal counsel. And the Business and Professions Committee and the Legislative Council had some feedback and suggestions on the bill's language, and so I'm bringing some of those suggestions to you today. To see if we want to do any proposed amendments based on this. So the first suggestion that we had has to do with the license display and required notice. We received feedback that it might still be appropriate to continuing to require the physical display of a license if a therapist sees a client in person at their primary place of practice. And so what we're proposing to do is to still continue to require that to be displayed just as it is now, but only require that when they're seeing clients in person, not via telehealth. And instead, we would leave the amendment that we're doing in this bill, that you would still have your license information in the notice to client kind of in the backup. So you're still getting that in that notice. You'd still be required to give your name, your license type, your license number, your expiration date at that one-time notice, so that the client has that as well. If you're doing telehealth, that way you don't have to be displayed in the background on a computer screen where nobody can see it, but they saw the information. So we're proposing to do that, and we're also proposing to strike what we had originally written in the bill proposal, that they need to inform their clients of any change to the active status of their license or registration. It was brought up by one of the Business and Professions Committee that could be kind of confusing on what that means, because the question arose, well, does that mean that if the status changes to they're on probation, do they have to tell people? And that's not something that's necessarily, that's kind of a separate issue than what we intended. That's not something that's required, is to tell people that you're on probation, unless there's certain terms of your probation that would affect the client's confidentiality or affect your ability to see a client, because maybe you can't see elderly people as part of your terms of probation. We weren't intending to alter that at all, and so we don't want any confusion there. So we're proposing to strike that. A licensee or registrant that expired would already need to tell their active clients that they were expired, or they would be in violation of law for unlicensed practice if they can't practice with them. They'd have to cancel their appointments. So we determined that that's not necessary, and those two kind of changes together would sort of solve the issue. That's the first proposal. The second proposed amendments are a little bit more basic housekeeping things. Legislative Council asked us to change. There's one case where we're talking about the number of persons per license that can be supervised. In another instance, there's an example on page 2010 where it says individual, and they asked us to either use persons or individual, not whole change. So staff decided that it would be best to use the term person, because we're already using the term individual to refer to individual supervision. If that makes sense. And so we're doing that clarifying change. The third amendment is to strike an obsolete date in the required notice to consumers. There was a date that referenced July 1, 2020 is when that requirement began. There's no need for it. Sometimes we keep beginning dates because the law cannot be applied retroactively. In this case, there's no need to keep it because that date is already passed and everybody's already done that and it's continuing to accept their new client. So it's fine to delete that, and they asked us, council asked us to do that. And then the item number 4 is really technical, and I actually included it in its own appendix because it just looked really confusing when I originally added it to attachment A. It's a double section in law, and there's a really technical reason that there's a double section in law right now. So the bill that's amending those sections that are listed there, that particular section that's included in the bill right now actually sunsets in 2026. And the reason that it sunsets in 2026 is because of these, we have a provision in our law right now where we allowed supervision via video conferencing due to concerns during COVID and start doing that. But there was a desire on behalf of the board and the legislature to sort of have a sunset date so that we could rediscuss the issue again and decide if we wanted to continue it past 2026. So that section, those sections that you see listed in the bill, that are in the bill, sunsets on January 1, 2020. There is another section that's still in our law that does not include the supervision via video conferencing component that becomes operative on January 1, 2026 if the board decides not to continue the supervision via video conferencing, which I don't think is going to happen. We're going to discuss that in another meeting. But Ledge Council made the very good point that we need to also, since this amendment's affecting those code sections, we need to also amend the code sections that we're not using right now in case we ever do. And hopefully that explanation makes sense. So it's very technical. But those are the changes that are being proposed at this time. They are shown in both attachments A and B, and so I will open it up for discussion.
Board members, any questions or comments for Roseanne? That seemed pretty straightforward to me as well. So, oh, sorry, Kelly.
I'm just gonna make a motion. There's no questions.
I have one question, if I may. Nick, LPCC. I'm curious, just to clarify my understanding. So I'm looking at attachment B, paragraph A, and then I'm looking at subsection 1, 2, and 3. And so I'm looking at particularly 1 and 3, I think are a little more clear to me, but for 2, it reads that a trainee on average should get at least 1 hour for every 5 hours of contact. So is that meaning anything over 5 hours, they need an additional hour? Or is it just 1 hour? I guess it's not very clear to me how that's worded, what exactly the requirements are for supervision.
You're looking at subsection.
So at the top of attachment B, A2.
Okay. Yeah. So for trainees, it's an average. So the way that the law works for trainees is that it's 1 hour for every 5. They get an additional hour in that week. It has to be. They need another hour of supervision, but it doesn't have to necessarily be that week. It just has to average out to 5 for every. So yeah. And then we're not actually making any amendments to that, but yes, it is a good question. It is a little bit, we have, in our forms, we explain that because it is.
I wonder if is there a reason why we couldn't amend that to make it more clear?
We would not want to do that at this point because there might be a lot of different opinions from different board members, different professional associations. So we would want to do that in a separate bill proposal or at a separate time. It kind of takes a long time to work through some of these changes, even though they might seem on the surface, they might seem really simple. Sometimes when you dive down into the reasonings and the history of why it's done that way, there's a lot of differing opinions on what should be done. So sometimes something that looks really simple and we think, oh, we can just change this, like it's really not really that simple to work sort of toward a solution that everybody can do. And it takes a lot of times several meetings sort of process.
You have a motion?
Yes, I move to direct staff to make any discuss changes, any non-substantive changes, amend languages and attachments A and B into SB 1024.
Do we have a second?
Justin Huff, second.
Justin? Okay, great. We will go to members of the audience in person for public comment. Any comments? Seeing none. Moderator, do we have any comments from remote participants?
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Now's the time to raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial-in users, dial *3 to raise your hand. and mobile device users may need to click the ... in order to find their hand button. We're going to take a few seconds to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue with the motion?
Yes, thank you. Seeing no other comments, Christina, will you take the vote?
Yes.
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 Yeah.
Yes.
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 Right. Next, we move on to item 21, telehealth committee updates. And Roseanne, we're sticking with you on this one.
And things, Wendy. So our telehealth committee, as I alluded to in a previous agenda item, held its final meeting in this past December 2023. And the purpose of the telehealth committee was to determine if any of the board statutes and regulations related to the practice of telehealth needed to be updated or clarified. In the last meeting, committee members and stakeholders discussed a couple of different things. One of them was the results of a survey and additional research to gather information about licensees and registrants' utilization of working for online-only therapy platforms and utilizing alternative methods of therapy. And so based on the discussion that came out of that at the committee, staff developed a guidance document for its licensees and registrants regarding the use of online therapy platforms and best practices related to those. And so I've included a link in the materials to that document, which are posted on our website now under FAQs under the telehealth section. So hopefully our licensees can utilize that. We've tried to get the word out on social media and things like that too. And then the other thing that was discussed at that meeting was what we looked at today. The final product of that was potential amendments needed for the board telehealth regulation based on everything that got brought up at the committee. We did an inventory and looked back at our regulations and said kind of, here, where do we stand? So that's what you saw and approved today. The telehealth committee was successful during its 3-year run, making a lot of different law changes. So to kind of summarize those, we had AB 232 that just passed this past year and came into effect January 1st. That was the temporary practice allowance for out-of-state licensees whose clients are visiting California temporarily. We had the amendments to permit supervision via video conferencing in all settings, AB 17, which I referenced and which we'll actually be talking about upcoming at P&A, then whether or not that's sunsetting in 2026. We have to talk about that again soon. AB 1759, which did a couple of different things. It required licensees and applicants for licensure to complete a 3-hour one-time training in the provision of mental health services via telehealth to make sure all licensees had a baseline of telehealth coursework and best practices now that telehealth has become more common. And then we also clarified that certain pre-licensees, such as trainees, can provide services with clients via telehealth because there are some instances of law when 2020 hit where that was very unclear. So that was the work of the telehealth committee. And of course, the telehealth committee can be revived in the future if it's found to be a need, but we felt like we had tackled all of the goals related to that for now. And so, and anything else that comes up via telehealth incidentally can be done through P&A, or if there's a lot of stuff, we can form another special committee.
Thank you, Roseanne. Any comments or questions? Kelly?
No, on the telehealth committee, it was me, Susan, and Chris Jones, and unfortunately, Chair Jones isn't here. But we did a lot of work on telehealth, and I was going to say we did a lot of work, but I think the better way of framing that is we and Roseanne Helms did a lot of work. She was the tip of the spear in all of this legislation, really, and in pushing it through. And we made a lot of really fundamental changes. We did discover that there are some issues regarding therapists' use of these kind of massive online platforms, but our jurisdiction and enforcement can only go so far. We don't regulate these big businesses. But there was some information that we discovered that was very fascinating. I think we got some of the first data on it, which will be hopefully put to some use. But again, I would thank Ms. Helms for really pushing all these changes through. Her work was instrumental.
Thank you, and thank you to the telehealth committee member.
Well, I just want to say also as a member of the committee, this is the prevailing way of offering services today and probably will even increase more than it is today. So I can envision that we will have more work to do. Thank you, Roseanne.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the board? Any comments from the public?
Just quickly wanted to second the note of thanks to the committee member again.
Thank you. Moderator, do we have any comments from remote participants?
We are once again open for public comment via WebEx. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial in users dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. I think we've lost all of our mobile users at this point.
Well, that makes that easy. Okay. We will keep checking in case for future items in case they return. So,
no requests so far.
Thank you. Okay. So we'll move on to item 22, Workforce Development Committee update with Roseanne.
Actually,
Oh,
I was going to take that over. Sorry.
okay.
Did I put that on there?
You sure did.
I was trying to pass it off to you. Sorry. So I will do that. So we did have a Workforce Development Committee that was on January 19th, if I get the right date. We discussed a lot of things, as some of the things we already talked about at this meeting. The first thing I presented, the Department of Healthcare Access and Information, HCI, I think you're familiar with that term by now, Research Data Center put out a data on race and ethnicity of California's health workforce. And what's really neat about these data sets is they put this online and you can actually filter for your particular license type. Even for us, you can do it between registrant and licensee. And it's kind of really interesting to see. And so I was kind of just showing what the results were, what they came up with, just as a presentation. I would encourage people to go look at the HCI website and look at those data sets. The one thing I did mention, albeit it wasn't I didn't, review the information too much, but it was interesting to see that my impressions when you first look at it, and I understand it's not an educational review of the data, that our registrant population, the diversity seems to be, there seems to be more diversity than our current licensing population. But yeah, we did discuss that. We also discussed an idea of permitting early eligibility to take the clinical exams. And this was based upon, Roseanne gave a presentation on this. And it was the idea of allowing somebody to take the clinical exam after obtaining 1,500 hours of supervision, as opposed to 3,000. So you would allow them into the clinical exam at 1,500 hours, and they can start taking the exam while collecting their hours, the rest of their 3,000 hours. So we discussed that. We also discussed a potential exam alternative, and this was based upon a model in Illinois. And the concept there is, once you're in the clinical exam, if you take the clinical exam and you fail, you would have the possibility of gaining another 3,000 hours. If you gain 3,000 hours, and those are approved hours, you can then get licensed without having to pass the clinical exam. That is something we're still continuing to look at. We're going to be looking at other states' examples. It was just really a discussion at this point. So we brought that forth, so kind of an idea. And I think really on both of those, the early eligibility and exam alternative, and the early eligibility one, we were going to be working with the ASWB and NBCC to collect more information for the next meeting. We also discussed possible proposed amendments to the board's English as a second language regulation. And, I honestly, I don't remember what the first motion was, but we are making edits to what we were proposing and bringing some additional items to the next meeting to discuss, language that would alter, trying to make it a little easier to actually get those accommodations. So we discussed the licensure pathway survey, and we discussed that today. So I'm going to go pass over that. And then the implementation of the voluntary demographic survey for candidates taking a board developed exam. That has to deal with the collecting the demographic information so we can do actual the evaluation of the exams. I'm sorry, I'm blanking out on the term. Thank you. Differential analysis of the exams. And so we're at this point we're trying, if you may have remembered before, I talked about it earlier, we are working with OAS to develop a way that we can actually have an online survey that a participant or somebody applying for the exam can participate voluntarily. And then we can collect that information and it would go directly to OES. So we do not have that within our data bank because there's legal obligations for that. And then the last thing we talked about was the development of a law and ethics continuing education course that the board would develop. And this was the thought of this was to try to give the registrants another possibility of a free, online course, because now they have to take three hours worth of law and ethics every renewal period. And so we're thinking that might help out. So really, again, that was kind of a discussion looking at that. It seemed like the workforce committee was kind of thought that was a good idea. We'll be bringing back, looking at that further and seeing where we go with that. So the next meeting will be, I believe, April 19th. There we go.
Thank you. Any questions from board members? Dr. Walker?
Yes, Dr. Walker, public board member. The next meeting, should that be workforce or it says telehealth?
Workforce development.
It should be the last sentence there?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's
just house cleaning.
Well, I apologize. I'm looking at my notes. Do I have separate notes? And I'm like, wait a minute. So yes, it should have been workforce.
Yeah, workforce. And
Yeah.
it is April 19th.
Seriously.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, that I
Okay.
I happen to know that April 19th is Hitler's birthday.
Oh, good. But he
Mm-hmm.
went to our meeting.
So any questions?
It's the typo in the report.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Any other questions or comments? Board member? Okay. Any questions or comments from the public? None. Moderator, do we have anybody online that would like to comment?
We do have people online. If they wish to comment, let's find out. Please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial in users dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to wait just a few seconds to see if we have any requests. Seeing no requests, do you wish to continue?
Yes, thank you. That moves us to item 23, update on board sponsored and board monitored legislation. And I'm pretty sure that's you.
That's me. So we're actually we just finished, the legislature's in the second year of a 2-year cycle. So there are some bills from last year left over that can still be alive. Actually, none of the bills that this board took a position on though last year are still moving at this point. So I'll go over that in a second. I want to talk to you about our 2 bills that we're sponsoring this year. We have SB 1024, which the board just approved amendments for that. So I'll be letting the office giving them the green light to make the amendments. So that bill will be running this year. And then we also have an omnibus bill proposal. That's just a sort of a cleanup bill that the Senate Business and Professions Committee runs every year. We just have one technical amendment this year that we'll be putting in the omnibus bill. So that hasn't been introduced yet. Excuse me, has not been introduced yet. And then in terms of the 2-year bills that are still alive or were still alive, that the board took positions on last year, SB 11, which would have made some mandates regarding the CSU system and mental health. That was a 2-year bill that the board supported. The authors indicated that they're not going to be pursuing that bill this year. SB 238, which has to do with health care coverage for minors and having an automatic independent medical review. The board supported that. That particular bill, the author is not moving. They've actually amended it into a new bill this year that I'm analyzing right now that we'll be talking about. And they kind of made further amendments and updated it into a new bill vehicle. So we'll be seeing that. SB 513 regarding mental health therapy for incarcerated individuals. The board had supported that. That bill is actually dead now. They're not moving forward with that. And SB 766, the social worker title protection bill, that bill actually has died and is not moving forward. The board was just watching that bill and haven't taken a position. And so what will be happening were all of bills all had to be introduced by February 16th. So I'm in the process of going through those now. There's a lot of interesting bills this year that I'm analyzing. So for those of you on the Policy and Advocacy Committee meeting, we'll be taking a first look at that on April 5th. And then the P&A Committee will be recommending positions to the board. And then the full board will be looking at bills to decide if the board wants to take positions on them on May 17th.
Thank you. Any questions for Roseanne on this one? None. Any questions in person? None. Moderator, any questions for a remote participant?
Let's ask. If you'd like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping the hand button. Dial in users dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to give you just a few more seconds to see if we have a request for public comment. And we have a request for comment. Kathy Atkins, hold on. I'm sending you a request to unmute your microphone. As usual, you'll be given 2 minutes to speak with a 15-second warning.
Really fast, moderator. You remind me of the movie Phone Guy. So I keep laughing.
Hold on just a moment. We're Kathy is trying to tell us something.
Oh. Anyways, I just thank you for the laughs. I wanted to
hold on, please. Kathy Atkins, are you with us?
Yes.
Oh, no, that's her.
Oh, my apologies. Everything started off very quietly, and then your voice cleared up. And go ahead. Time is starting now.
No, she's
gone.
Oh, we lost her.
Oh, let's try her again.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, sorry. Kathy Atkins with CAMPT. I just wanted to ask the board and Policy and Advocacy Committee to consider reviewing AB 2142 by Assembly Member Haney. This is a bill CAMPT is co-sponsoring with the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, which is an offshoot from a bill last year, which would make a pilot program at 2 correctional facilities, 1 female, 1 male, to mandate mental health services for all populations, not just those classified with the highest level of severe mental illness. This is something we're moving forward with. We're actually lobbying on it all day Monday. And the fact sheet just came out, so we're finishing it up, and we will send it over to Roseanne for the Policy and Advocacy Committee to review and assess. But we just ask that you take a look at it. And it's AB 2142, and we'll send more information through Roseanne. So thank you.
It is on my list to analyze, and I'm very happy to know that there's now a fact sheet. So, thanks, Gabby.
Thank you.
And thank you. I apologize for mistaking your voice for one in the room. And that was our only request for comment.
Great, thank you so much. We are on to item 24, suggestions for future agenda items. Any suggestions from board members? Dr. Walker?
Yes, Annette Walker, Public Board Member. We had a great conversation earlier around communications and the call center and emails and things like that. And I'm wondering if that's something we can bring back. Because it seems like, just to really take the time needed to discuss it more in detail. Thoroughly. I'm sure everyone would appreciate it.
Okay. Board Member Ortega.
Yes, Abigail Ortega. I'm curious about like where licensees actually work, because there's like a lot of conversation around there being a shortage, but is it because the majority are in private practice, not in community healthcare settings? So like we can also know like who we're talking to. Yeah. Well done.
Susan, I think you have.
I'm wondering if we're going to have a discussion about AI, because I remember when I was doing my Senate thing, Nick told me when he did his Senate thing, they have a lot of questions. In fact, that's all they want to know about is what we have decided to do about AI. So I think it might be worth the discussion.
Yeah. Can I add to that question? Oh, specifically with AI, one thing that I have been reading about is there are some programs that are recording the whole therapy session and then doing like a transcript. So I think that in particular, something to look at.
Kelly?
On that point, and I wish telehealth had actually taken this up, but we kind of closed it out before we had this discussion. There are applications in use that are sort of quasi-therapeutical, where you're talking to somebody and they're offering almost therapeutic-like lives back. And that is concerning in the sense of unlicensed practice, but isn't really unlicensed practice if it's a program. You know, I would amplify what Susan has said as well. It is a little concerning, but there, you know, the board's limitations are probably to natural persons, and again, it doesn't cover companies.
Yeah, and that's called conversational AI. It's like the.
Great. Thank you. Any other suggestions? Any suggestions from the in-person audience? None. Moderator, do we have any suggestions for future agenda items from our remote audience?
Now is the time to raise your hand if you have a future agenda item suggestion. Please tap that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial in users, dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. And Kathy, once again, I'm sending you a request to unmute your microphone.
Kathy Atkins with CAMFT. Sorry to keep bringing it up, but I'll bring it up again here for a future item, hopefully at a very near future committee. I've looked at the committees. I'm not sure which one it fits into, but defer to Roseanne and Steve on that. But the discussion of a transition to the national exam for MFTs at a not only a future meeting, but a future meeting to hopefully happen sooner rather than later. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And that was our only request.
Thank you. On to item number 25, public comment for items not on the agenda. Do we have any board members who have comments? John.
So I know all of us want to pack up computers and go home and get on our planes and get in our cars, but I think I want to take us from AI to a very real thing that's happened in our world that has a lot of depth and meaning to me. And I'd like to invite us as a board and those of us who are joining us today to take a moment to respect and recall the life of Nex Benedict, who died on February 18th, 2024, a day after they were beaten by classmates in a bathroom at Owasso High School in Oklahoma. Now, some of you may be wondering, who is Nex Benedict? They were a 16-year-old sophomore, a straight-A student who enjoyed reading, art, their cat Zeus, creating new memories and recipes, and playing video games. They were also transgender, and in early 2023, Nex became a target of bullies at school who tormented them after they came out as gender nonconforming. Yes, Nex's story is tragic. It's devastating. Sometimes it's impossible to understand. And yet it's not uncommon in the world that we live in, where the LGBTQ community has become a target of vitriol, hate, and in 2023, the focus of over 500 anti-LGBTQ bills introduced in state legislatures across the country. And already here in 2024, we have over 300 anti-LGBTQ bills already engaged and counting, and it's only March 1st. As a queer adult, I have worked hard to create safety and sanctuary for myself, my loved ones, and my community. But kids don't always have that same sense of security. In Gleason's most recent National School Climate Survey, it became clear that over 80% of LGBTQ students report feeling unsafe in school. 76% of LGBTQ students report being verbally harassed in school, and over 30% of LGBTQ students report being physically harassed. Well, we also know that suicide rates amongst LGBTQ kids are more than double the national average, and that number increases dramatically for trans kids. So yes, here in California, we have taken many great steps to protect the rights and well-being for our LGBTQ students. And yet, as I travel around the state and lead trainings and do speaking engagements, I'm witnessing the cracks in the system, where school districts are offering lip service to state policies, but don't really follow through when kids need protection, where school boards are enacting arbitrary anti-LGBTQ policies based on opinion and not best practices, and where even the beauty of a rainbow is now viewed as something dangerous if flown in the form of a flag over a city hall. We must do better. We can do better. Time and time again, research is showing that by simply having one affirming adult and help and support, it improves the mental health and well-being of LGBTQ students. So I challenge every teacher to learn to be willing to invite an LGBTQ student to sit in their classroom during lunch when they're afraid to be out on the playground. I challenge every coach who notices a kid who may be uncomfortable in their body to check in and see how they're doing okay. I challenge parents to work through their fears and anxieties so they can be there to affirm, embrace, and love their amazing LGBTQ kid. And if you are a person of power, someone in this room, someone who may be listening today, someone who may read this transcript, I beg for you to fight for the safety and well-being of LGBTQ kids in our community. And finally, I ask each of us to examine our own feelings about this moment. This tragic death of Nex Benedict, who just wanted to be themselves. And what can each of us do to make sure that tomorrow there's not another news report of a tragic death of one more LGBTQ kid, whether their own hand or the hand of another? So thank you all for your indulgence.
Any other board members? Thank you. Thank you, John. Any comments from those in the audience? Moderator, do we have any comments for items not on the agenda from our remote participants?
This is the last call for public comment. This is for items not on the agenda. If you would like to make a comment, please raise a hand by tapping that hand button at the bottom of the screen. Dial in users, dial *3 to raise a hand, and we will call on people in the order we have requests. We're going to take just a few seconds now to see if we have a request for public comment. Seeing no request for public comment, do you wish to continue?
Yes, thank you. Last item is adjournment. Thank you all for being here today. And we'll see you all at our next meeting on May 16th and 17th. Thank you very much. Meeting adjourned.